to the midnight hour. All the way we go, we go. All the way, we're gonna fly out and run it wild until the midnight hour.
The lights out, I feel you. You're inside of this room. You're close by, I can't move. Paralyzed at the sight of you. You walk up, your hands out. I stand up, my guard's down. You whisper in my ear. Paralyzed at the sight of you. 'Cause you get lost in the cover out of sight. And it's true, can discover all your lies, all your lies.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Scotland's Calvine UFO mystery has been solved at last. On August 4th, 1990, two young chefs had been walking in the Cairngorms National Park near Perth when they spotted a strange diamond-shaped object in the sky nearby. Terrified, the men had hid behind some bushes to observe the mysterious craft. A short time later, they heard the sound of an RAF jet approaching. The plane seemed to change course. Said one, quote, "I discovered that the only other British Harriers were privately owned by BAE Systems, the defense contractor. They use their Harriers as multi-role defense test platforms, testing BAE advanced technology." He continued, quote, "I dug deeper and found that Maroney Advanced Materials, based inside BAE HQ at Wharton, Lancashire, were probably working on an advanced stealth skin material for the USAF. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com.
Friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night. Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, we made it to Friday. I can't believe it, with all the bad stuff in the news and getting hit with solar flares and all that. You know, another, JC, another rip into the sun last night. Huge. You could put 100 and some Earths in that rip.
That is a big rip. That probably explains some of the glitching that I've been noticing, maybe.
Well, you know, when it starts hitting the Earth, you know, it does charge, you know, the magnetic field and all that. You know, they're talking about, we got hit, you know, last week. If we would have been like in the, you know, that the big one it hit where it took out the telegraph and all that back years ago.
Kensington.
Yes. If we were still that technology, we would have gone through the same thing last week.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been good. And listen, we lose everything. You know what happens. People will turn into, what do they call that, tribe mentality real quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the scary part. You know, where do you go? You know, buy a bunker. But I wouldn't buy a bunker. A friend of mine has a bunker over in Eastern Washington. And I said, you know, I was talking to, you know, Stephen Davenport on this, you know, while back. And I said, why did you buy a bunker? Well, just in case down in the future. Now, he's never moved into it or done anything, but he has it for years, okay? And here's the problem. They know where those bunkers are. They know where every single one is. So you're not any better off being in that or being in your backyard in a 6-foot hole with a door over it with 3 feet of dirt.
No, and you're really not doing yourself a favor if you got a generator too, because that's like a big beacon of night. Here I am with a generator and a bunch of supplies.
Well, you might have your barbecue going if you got if you got your generator going, have a barbecue going, roast hot dogs and all that for when all the people come for your food.
Yeah, that's right. Have it already prepared for them.
Yeah. Well, in Moscow, Idaho, the other night, in a restaurant, not a bar, not somebody's garage, but in a restaurant, the employees come to work and they notice that the glass door was broken. And they go in and they're looking, okay, we got robbed. Well, the money they kept there wasn't touched. The food wasn't touched, but guess what they found? They found a drunk in the restaurant. And the drunk was a bear. Passed out, drunk, but not just that. There was a couple drunk raccoons running around.
The whole Noah's Ark showed up. Listen, there is something going on because the 5 years or so we've been on this show, how many times have we reported drunken bears and other animals that are partaking in people's beer and food? It's astonishing. Yeah,
but I thought this time of year that bears are in a cave or in a hole and, for the winter, sleeping.
Well, I guess we got one rogue bear that had an inkling for some beer.
Maybe it was an alcoholic, and in case of emergency, he had to break down the door to get the beer. I mean, face it, okay? How about the couple last year that went out to dinner and a movie? They come home, and the wife, they figure they're going to go make some, like one of my friends said, booty. They were going to go in okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. A booty call. Go in the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And the wife goes in there first, and guess what she found? Not somebody else, not her husband, but a passed out bear.
Yeah, well, yeah. There was the other one too, where the husband cuddled up and he cuddled up to a bear, and he was thinking, "Boy, honey, you need to shave your legs or something." And next thing that's a twofer. That's happened twice.
Yeah. Well, how about not a bear? How about a snake? You go into a fancy restaurant in Florida, right?
Oh boy.
In Miami, and you decide, I got to go read a book in the library for a minute. That's the bathroom, people. And the guy sits down on the commode. And all of a sudden, he had his manhood got attacked by a python. It came up from the sewer and attached it right onto his manhood.
Yeah, snake probably just thought it was a couple eggs or something.
That's a booty call. Anyway, so could you imagine the guy? You're eating in this high class restaurant, and you hear some guy screaming from the bathroom, right? Yeah. And they run in, and the guy's screaming, and then the paramedics come in, the fire department all come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The embarrassment of having to break the toilet, and then. What do you do? How do you get a snake off somebody's testicles?
Well, how about the tug of war that probably went on between him and the snake in the toilet? And then it's like that scene out of Something About Mary. They probably brought in everybody in the restaurant and everybody to come take a look at it because it's so bizarre. I mean, the poor guy.
Yeah, well, that makes a new definition for blue balls, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'll tell you. He's got PTSD from oh my goodness. You got to have something from that.
Can you imagine every time you have to go use the bathroom, you're paranoid to sit down?
Yeah, what do? You take it. What do you see? Take some kind of screen in there, or you poke around?
Well, how are you going to put a screen down and take a dump?
I don't know. You won't expect to get lose your couple eggs to a snake.
Well, could you imagine, again, like in India, we got to hurry up because I got a great guest. In India, there was a lady sleeping by a tree. And all of a sudden, somebody's walking by and they see a head, and here's the snake. And she was lucky they managed to save her life. Another minute or two, she would have been gone.
Yeah, you get down the snake gullet, it's all over.
Okay, let's do this, and then let's bring our guests on, okay?
Yep.
You're listening to Night Dreams Radio with Gary Anderson.
That is me. Who's our guest tonight?
Hey, our guest tonight is Michael Flem. Now, he is a researcher and adjunct professor of history and philosophy. Michael is also a book reviewer for Publishers Weekly. Michael is also an author, and his latest book is Visions of Atlantis.
Well, Michael, welcome to the show. I hope you're staying out of trouble.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary.
Yeah. Watch out for snakes and bears, I'll tell you that.
I'm from South Florida, so.
Oh, then you know how that is. Well, what got you into and interested into Atlantis?
Yeah, I think I had seen a lot of people writing different books about the subject, and some were writing some really great books, and but it seemed like everybody had a kind of personal stake in it. I think people had become very interested in proving, that it was definitely here or definitely there. And what I wanted to do was take a big picture snapshot, not just globally, but throughout time, and using some unconventional sources like clairvoyance and remote viewing within reason, not as the main evidence of my book, but to kind of supplement the more historical or cultural evidence that I have found, because I had never really seen those two camps talk to each other. I had seen a lot of people that had just focused on, say, past life regressions on Atlantis, which were very interesting, or people that were just focusing on, say, Plato's account of Atlantis. And I wanted to see, is there a possibility that some of the clairvoyant and remote viewing evidence actually lines up with traditional sources? And then is there any hard evidence from, say, archaeology, linguistics, or even oceanography that might even push the argument even further? And, to my great surprise, after about 7 years of studying this and writing this book, I had to come to the conclusion, as somebody who was quite skeptical going into it, that, there was a quite compelling story, and I found it fascinating. So, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to share, some of the things I found.
Well, one thing is I've had people on the show in the past, they talk about being regressed and remember being in Atlantis. But here's the problem. Unless you are going to somebody who is certified to, put you in a trance and regress you, you could get a lot of false thoughts of things that maybe never happened.
Absolutely. And actually, that was something that I tried very hard to qualify. And I think that's why when, for example, I was interested in who were the first people to use, say, clairvoyance or clairaudience or any kind of, non-local perception to talk about Atlantis. And so one of the first sources, I think probably the first, at least documented, was a 17-year-old kid named Frederick Oliver, who was living in 1881 when he started, in his words in the preface of his manuscript, receiving kind of clairaudient messages during waking life, and ended up automatically writing a coherent and incredibly detailed story of Atlantis at the year 11,160 BC. And this was a kid who had no education. He was a minor. He had just, moved out there from Washington, D.C. with his parents to help him on the estate that they were living on, prospecting for gold and silver at the end of the closing of the frontier, in the Wild West, essentially. And yet he's describing technology that he could not have imagined unless he was the greatest science fiction writer that we've never discovered. So I absolutely appreciate you saying that, because I could go on my couch and, having watched Star Wars and read Graham Hancock books, say, oh, this was my past life in Atlantis. So I wanted to find who were the original ones. And so two of them were, Frederick Oliver, who wrote a manuscript that later became a book that his mother published after he died, which is another important fact, because people could say, oh, he was being sensational and he sold a bunch of copies. He was copying Jules Verne or something. No, he put it in a drawer, was embarrassed about it. It kind of ruined his social life. He was made uncomfortable by the process. And yet he predicted flying machines. He describes a smartphone. He describes video surveillance. He even has a coherent and extremely compelling description of how they perceived science and chemistry and the role of the sun in human evolution, and all sorts of things that you would expect to find in the notebooks of, say, Nikola Tesla, not a uneducated 17-year-old kid living in, Eureka, California in 1881. So that was just kind of one interesting window. And then, of course, the second one would have been Edgar Cayce, who gave 15,000 trance readings from a near coma state on his couch, and about 14,500 of those had nothing to do with Atlantis. He was more concerned with helping people find missing people. He was concerned with mainly health readings. People would come to him and say, look, my daughter has tried everything. She's paralyzed. Can you do a remote diagnosis of what's wrong with her body? And he was studied by scientists from Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, who witnessed him do this. And I put those accounts in the book. And he could actually do that without even seeing the person.
Now,
and
Michael,
then prescribe remedies and things like that.
When he was doing this too, towards his end of his lifespan, they told him to quit doing it because it was speeding up his demise.
Yes.
Am I right on that?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, he died in 1945, I think around 65 years old. And towards the end, he was doing about 6 readings a day, because this was, of course, at the final brutal stages of World War II. And many people were asking, like, where's my son? What happened to my son? Or asking him questions about the future of geopolitics. What's going to happen to Hitler? What's going to happen to the... people were terrified. This was at the height of World War II. And so you're right. And he died of a stroke, in his home. And his wife always said, I think, that those readings were too much, because it wasn't just like a person who kind of casually goes down in a, hypnotic trance with a doctor, with a watch. He went into a hypnagogic near-death coma state. And if he wasn't brought out of that in a very controlled fashion, with basically pre-programmed he could die, according to a doctor that was watching it, because his heart rate was so low and things like this. So I looked at people that, number one, had a documented track record of, like Edgar Cayce, demonstrably using clairvoyance to solve other problems, with great results, with sworn affidavits and testimonies of secular doctors watching him. So when he happened to talk about Atlantis and happened to find, say, geological discoveries that nobody knew about in 1930, I just took it at face value and said, okay, well, if he said this, is there any evidence of that? And that's kind of how the book progresses, is, it's a history from pre-Platonic sources, because Plato, contrary to popular belief, was probably the 7th person to talk about Atlantis, not the first. But the most detailed account from antiquity. And, it goes from antiquity to today. And it just basically shows people, look, this is how this story has been interpreted for 2,000 years in Western history, and a little bit from India and other places, Mexican history, or say, Mesoamerican history more correctly. And let's see if we can put the jigsaw puzzle together and see if we can find some hard evidence to corroborate some of the more wild speculation that these clairvoyants said about a time that's very distant to us, 12,000 plus years ago.
Well, if you go back in time, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, the news media. We didn't have any of that stuff. But yet, Atlantis has been talked about, like you mentioned, the young kid in the late 1800s. And then you even go back to Plato. You go back to all this stuff, and it's not just one area. It's all over the world that people, talk about Atlantis. How would they have known about it?
Well, it's a great question. I'm just looking here at a list I put in my book, and the first account that I could find of anything resembling this culture would be somewhere around 1250, 1260 BC. So you're talking almost 1,000 years before, 900 years before Plato wrote his dialogues, which is the Turin Kings list from Egypt. And in this list, which is a physical document that was, partially recovered through archaeology, it lists, depending on how you translate it, 10 Auletian or Auritian god kings who ruled in a foreign land during the reign of the gods before approximately 9,850 BC, after which time they were replaced by another set of kings. And there were 10 of them. And I think that's important because in Plato's account, in his dialogues, it's not Plato who's telling the story. Plato's recounting a story that was given to his, fourth removed, by about 200 years removed relative, Solon, who was a real person, who was an Athenian politician. And according to Solon, he went to Egypt to find out the history of the Mediterranean region because the Egyptians had the oldest records. And it was there that the temple priest told Solon the story of Atlantis. So the story of Atlantis originates in Egypt, but was transmitted to Solon and then down now 200 years plus the line to Plato. And he wrote it in his Critias and Timaeus dialogues. But I find it interesting that previous to those dialogues, because everybody says, Plato invented it. Well, first of all, Plato says in the opening lines of one of those dialogues, Critias is talking to Socrates in the dialogue, and he says, as strange as this story sounds, every word of it is true. And it's vouched for by Solon, the wisest of the seven sages. So if it was a myth, why would you feel the need to disclaim that? And secondly, as I show in the book later, because the story originates in Egypt and was told to the Greeks, well, then you would expect evidence of Atlantis, let's say, in Egypt. And that's where things like the Great Pyramid certainly come into play, and things like the Sphinx even come into play, because as many people have shown, it's very likely that they were much older than, say, the traditional, 4,500 years dating we traditionally give them, based on all sorts of things, astronomical alignments, water erosion on the Sphinx. And also, recently, scientists have, I'm not going to say conclusively, but fairly conclusively proven that there was some sort of cosmic catastrophe around 10,000 BC that ended the last ice age. And so in the account that Plato wrote about, the Egyptian priest tells Solon, you guys, you Greeks have a myth of Phaeton, who's driving his father's chariot across the sky, and he loses control and falls to the earth and burns up everything on the earth. But the Egyptians say, but that's not a myth. That's a true account of a celestial body falling to earth and burning up everything around it and erasing records. But we Egyptians keep records in stone. And so you Greeks, you Western civilization, progenitors have to begin again like children. And so it makes sense, actually.
It does, but again, like we were talking, this Earth, I think, has been rebooted at least once or twice or more. Who knows? We don't even really know how old the Earth is, because that keeps on changing as we keep advancing in technology and sciences. But the thing, it really concerns me, and I don't want to sound weird here, but could Atlantis been a race? They're even saying, and I was reading a news article, Michael, yesterday, that they figured that Mars actually had a human civilization on it, and something happened, like maybe a nuclear war or something that bad happened on Mars, and a bunch of them managed to come down and populate the Earth.
It's possible. There's fairly good evidence that the CIA in the 80s gave one of their best remote viewers the target of the surface of Mars in the year 1 million BC. And there is a document in CIA declassified records of that reading where the remote viewer wrote down what he saw. And he said, I see a station with geometric shapes on it, and there's a catastrophe and people are fleeing. So, I don't talk about that in the book per se, but it's absolutely possible. And, regarding the reboot, it's fascinating because Edgar Cayce, who had a 90% plus accuracy rating, not just on diagnosing medical illnesses, but on finding mineral deposits, geological things that he discovered. For example, before I tell you about the reboot, Edgar Cayce said in 1932 that there used to be a enormous, the size of the Amazon River, river system that crisscrossed through Central Africa and had its origin at the Nile and emptied into the Atlantic Ocean near the Congo side of the country. Now, when he said that, there was no evidence of that. No one had ever considered that. It was underground until 1986. Space Shuttle Imaging Radar determined, oh, you know what? There's an underground river system 6 feet under the sand that crisscrossed and emptied into the Atlantic Ocean on the west coast of Africa near the Congo region. So these are extraordinary guesses if he's just making it up. And when people started asking him about Atlantis, specifically in one reading, it was like a whole day session where about 10 people just blasted him with questions like, okay, we want to know from the beginning to the end. He does list 3 reboots. He says basically the first destruction, he gives a very specific date, 50,722 BC. Now you might think, well, that's impossible. We have no evidence. Well, there's a mine in Swaziland that mainstream science has dated to 50,000 plus BC. He says the second destruction was 28,000 BC. The third destruction, when it went from a continent to 5 islands to finally 3 islands, which is the story Plato would have been telling, was in about 10,000 BC. So again, it's right in line. And it's important to note that Edgar Cayce, when he was not in a trance, was an uneducated Sunday school teacher who had never studied history on any kind of professional level and had actually no knowledge of any ancient subject, according to all witnesses that lived with him and knew him. But when he went into a trance, he was able to access what he called the superconscious, or Akashic records, he calls it sometimes, which was kind of like a cloud computing database of the entire history of knowledge. And he says anyone can access it. It's just incredibly difficult if you don't have, that ability. But it's theoretically possible, just like some of the best remote viewers can teach you. But then there's some that just have a natural proclivity that makes them, hired by the government, let's say.
Yeah. And you're right. We need to take about a 2.5 minute break, Michael. Sure. Then we'll come back and we'll talk maybe what Atlantis could have looked like and how advanced technology they were. I will say on Mars, what they said in this news article is, doing the samples, what we've been able to do with Mars with our rovers and stuff. They said that what one compound they got off of Mars from the sand, soil, whatever it is, said that only could have been formed if there was a nuclear detonation. So
Well,
that makes that kind of all kind of jives. We're going to be back with Michael right after this break. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Don't forget, at the top of the hour, we have Mark coming on and telling us about what is going on with the universe, the sun and the stars, Saturn and Jupiter and all that. And then we're going to open up the call-in line. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
To your heart, I have been lost for all of this time. Take me to your heart, where it is safe. You know I will not let you down. Take me to your heart. I need to calm down. To your heart, I need to tell you how much I have missed you so. I feel cold. I need to get warm, baby. Feeling cold in my soul.
Captain Paul Watson was a co-founder of the Greenpeace Foundation in 1972 and the founder of Sea Shepherd in 1977. In 2022, he was forced out of Sea Shepherd in a hostile takeover. So, he established the Captain Paul Watson Foundation to carry on the work they've been doing for half a century with the specific strategy of aggressive non-violence, which means aggressive intervention without killing or injuring anyone. They took the name he created and the logos he designed, but they couldn't take away his life's mission. The foundation will carry on. This summer, with their new ship, the John Paul DeJoria, they intend to intervene against the Icelandic slaughter of endangered fin whales. And in 2024, they plan to be in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary to stop the return of Japanese whalers who will be defying the International Court of Justice. They have one ship, but they need two more. Please visit paulwatsonfoundation.org to become a monthly donor. By becoming a monthly donor, you can help grow their Navy and help save our oceans. We don't survive on this planet with dead oceans. If the oceans die, we die. Please visit now www.paulwatsonfoundation.org. Digital Broadcasting Radio, like it should be. The best in paranormal talk radio with your host, Gary Anderson.
And we are back with Michael. Again, I'm just kind of curious. What, type of civilization did they have? How far advanced were they?
That's a great question, and it forms a central part of the book. In Plato's account, which again is just the most famous, he describes basically the principal island with a beautiful megalithic, the famous circular city that's now so popular in the news all of a sudden. He's basically just describing Bronze Age technology. He's saying, look, they had chariots and they sailed in triremes and they fought with basically the hoplite weapons that he would have been familiar with. So when anybody talks about high technology in Atlantis, or when I talk about it, people say, well, you're just making that up because you lived in the 20th century and you're projecting. And I say, okay, fair enough. But when kids in the 19th century, like Frederick Oliver, who, had just probably had the first light bulb, installed in his cabin, and had never heard of a television and had never heard of a flying machine pre-Wright brothers, except for, say, a Zeppelin. When he describes it, I take it more seriously. And in his account, in the final iteration, the third iteration of Atlantis, when it was 3 principal islands off, say, the coast of Portugal, where the Azores, and the enormous seamount underneath the Azores would have been above land at that time, likely, according to oceanographers, not my opinion. That was the kind of apex of technology, according to the source that was speaking through this kid, Frederick Oliver, in 1881. And he goes into incredible detail about what it's one of the only windows I have ever seen into what daily life on the ground would be. And it's more akin to Star Wars than it is to anything, even in late 19th century America. For example, he's talking about, I'm walking down, he's channeling a past life of some source, he claims, that's asking him to write this story down. He says, I'm walking through the capital city, the circular city on the island of Poseid, which was one of the 3 islands, the other 2 being, according to Edgar Casey, Og, O-G, and Arion, which is interesting. And he says, I'm walking down, into the circular city, and I get in a kind of monorail tram system that's electrically powered, and it takes me to see the emperor. Now, this is a kid writing in 1881. So that's already strange that he's, got these images of monorail tram systems in his mind. But then he says, and he's trying to explain it the best way he can, but what he's describing is a video surveillance camera, because he says there's a black mirror above a wall with wires behind it, and the king can hear and see everything I'm saying, and he's speaking to an 1881 audience, and he's saying, as strange as this sounds, that's the technology we had. And now to us, that's just, he's looking at a flat screen TV. But to imagine a flat screen TV in 1881 is bizarre. Then he continues, I was sent on a diplomatic mission to where modern day India is today. And I got in a roughly 200-foot long aluminum cigar-shaped flying machine with no flight surfaces that could travel underwater or in the air, which sounds very much like later cigar-shaped UFO sightings and radar returns from the 20th century.
It does.
Right. And he says, this was powered by what he called the night side forces. And he goes into a kind of treatise that you would think, Tesla or Edison or Keeley or some other inventor was writing instead of a 17-year-old kid. And he says the night side forces are basically the cathodic polar opposite of the impulsion forces that we would consider in the 20th century as being useful for propelling society, like the combustive forces. And he's like, in the night side forces, you can entrain to things. And so he's like, this craft, we didn't have to pilot it. It was entrained through sort of radio or something to a kind of crystalline architecture in a power center, and there were pre-programmed flight routes. So we would just put in a coordinate and zip away, and if we wanted to, we could descend and go in the ocean and look at the sharks and things. And it's quite interesting. And
you know what, Michael? It sounds like they had AI, artificial intelligence, but back then.
Yes, and in fact, that's very interesting, Gary, that you say that, because when he's describing the downfall of Atlantis, and this was a real breakthrough for me. There are 2 breakthroughs from this book that really kind of shocked me. His story is Atlantis roughly in the year 11,000 BC. Plato says the story ends in 9,600. That was the final destruction. Now, this kid had never read Plato, to my knowledge. And even if he did, it's hard to explain what he's about to say. So he's telling the reader, he's like, I bet you want to know how Atlantis ended. How, after I died around 11,100 BC, what happened? He says, in the intervening 1,000 to 1,500 years, the society became ruled by a technological elite who could divorce themselves from physicality and become, in his words, as electricity. So you're talking some sort of transhumanism or AI uploading your consciousness, Ray Kurzweil type thing back then. And he said, and because of this, all these advancements in technology, the phones we had, the television, the flying machines, the monorail system, after hundreds of years, people lost touch with how to do this because the ruling class didn't let us learn these things, and we regressed into a state of barbarism and human sacrifice, Michael, akin to the Aztecs.
Not to interrupt you, but think about this. If our grid system went down and didn't come up for a couple years, do you know that a lot of people would perish? The first week, the first month, the first year, the population would be depopulated a huge amount. And then let's say something happened, like a nuclear war or something major happened.
Yeah.
We would be back almost to the Stone Age. How many people know how even to take care of themselves and survive? And then all our technology of designing stuff is all based now on technology. If we didn't have computers and we didn't have all this stuff, how many young people, even you go into a grocery store, and if the power goes out, they have to shut the tills off because the cashiers don't even know how to make change.
Yeah, right. Or people don't even know how to, get to across their neighborhood without GPS now, let alone imagine, if the scenario you said happened, you might even still have a physical phone with no infrastructure, no satellites, being powered anymore, no grid. And you're just sitting there telling your grandchildren, if you survived the, meltdown, back in my day, this Black Mirror thing, it had all the books in the world in it, and I could talk to my friend Gary across the world. They would just think you're crazy if they didn't grow up with it. And that's exactly what he said happened. And so that was critical because it justified that gap, from both sides. Because here you have a kid pre-high technology 20th century age describing basically the technology that we are only approaching today, which is a data point that's important. But then you also have the explanation for, okay, well then where is that in Plato's account? Well, Plato's account from the Egyptians was describing it at the time of the destruction, by which point Atlantis in Plato's account was an extremely warlike principal island that was invading the Mediterranean on a kind of conquest, which is what traditionally desperate cultures in a state of decay do. That's what dying empires traditionally do. So it actually tied in perfectly and explained, like, look, this didn't happen overnight. It happened over thousands of years. And the final destruction wasn't just, perhaps one day. In Edgar Casey's account of the final destruction, it's something actually that was told to certain groups of people in Atlantis by basically what Edgar Casey said this in 1932. He says, you were told, he's giving a past life reading, before UFOs were even in the public consciousness in 1932. He says, you were told by the people from the outer spheres through a portal to prepare for the final destruction in the coming 100 years.
Well, could they have had a nuclear war? And that could have maybe vaporized the Atlantis, the continent, or cause it to sink within?
Well, in Edgar Casey's account, he's asked that question. Pre-nuclear technology, by the way. He's asked these questions in 1930s, principally, 1932. And somebody asked him, what was the first destruction? You say there were 3 iterations of Atlantis, a continent, then 5 islands, then 3. Okay, Mr. Casey, what were the causes of the first destruction? And it's very interesting. He says, it was a misapplication of a stratospheric weapon that was intended to cause limited volcanic reactions to reduce megafaunal animal populations. He calls it the animal menace that was overrunning the earth in 50,000 BC. Now, what's fascinating, Gary, is that just out of curiosity, I said, okay, he said 50,722 BC. Is there any evidence of a megafaunal animal extinction? Yes, there is. In the Journal of Quaternary Studies, I find indeed there is an unexplained massive megafaunal extinction in the year 50,000 BC, plus or minus 250 years. So it's like, these are extraordinary guesses, you know? And then the second destruction was an overcharging of this enormously powerful crystal that Edgar Cayce said was used to power the second iteration of Atlantis, called the Tuoi stone. And a technician accidentally overtuned it, and it blew out the substations and caused a enormous fracture in the landmass. The final one, he never describes, but Plato does, which is a comet impacting Earth. And again, you say, okay, is there any evidence of a comet impacting Earth? Yes, Dr. James Kennett, who's not a remote viewer from the University of Santa Barbara, said, you know, in 2010 or 8, there is indeed evidence of a comet strike in the ocean or on the North Atlantic ice sheet around 10,000 to 10,800 BC. That's the most likely explanation for the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of our modern Holocene era. So again, if these are all just fictions, well, then they're astoundingly accurate, you know? And when people say, well, where is it? Well, you know, most of these materials, if that ship was made of aluminum, it's not lasting thousands of years.
No, but can I ask you a question? Some people speculate Atlantis could actually be in Antarctica too. You know, as Antarctica is thawing out, they have found some really strange things. You know, back, yeah, JC, you can jump in here. Remember back, we looked at a satellite image of pillars that looked like a castle or something, and all of a sudden it was removed off of, you know, Google.
Yes, actually, we did do that, and it was scrubbed. We went back to check it out, and it was gone. But yeah, there was pillars, and it looked like giant steps also that was coming out of the ice.
Yeah, and also Mary Joyce is the one, I think it turned us on to it. Rather interesting. You know, again, I'm just wondering, could that have been a part of Atlantis? Could Atlantis actually not been on just one continent, but all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, the evidence suggests not just the clairvoyant evidence, because Edgar Cayce is very specific. And I guess I could answer the question in reverse. You know, Edgar Cayce's, in his 500 readings he gave on Atlantis, randomly, to random people over the course of 20 years, that all, unbelievably, when you storyboard them over years and years, as I have done, they all add up. They're all internally coherent. And he says that, look, certain groups of people were warned, look, there's going to be a major catastrophe that's basically going to destroy the Earth and all civilizations on it that are not prepared. And he said that it wasn't just that something happened and, you know, a couple people got in rowboats and ran away from a tidal wave. That these people knew, look, we have to plan for the next coming decades. And so multiple groups of people over hundreds of years, not just in a day or a year, started planning. And one of the places they went, he said, was the Giza Plateau. The second place was the Pyrenees Mountains, where the Basque country is, where they speak an a non-Indo-European language that's more related to Central American indigenous languages, because the third place Edgar Cayce says they went is the Yucatan Peninsula. And so it actually makes perfect sense, because if you go to, you know, look at the story of, say, the Maya or the Aztecs, the word Aztec or Azteca, you know, in their foundational myth, where do they say they come from? We come from the place called Aztlan. So it's like, and they have a god called Atlanteotl, who's holding the heavens on his shoulders, just like the Greeks had Atlas. And what's in between them? The Atlantic Ocean. And what did that kid say in 1881 when he was describing how proud he was of this past life in Atlantis that he's channeling? He says, Atla which held aloft the world in science, in technology, woe is thee, doomed to the grave. But that set off a kind of bing. It's like, that's what that represents. That's what Atlas represents. It represents the civilization holding the world aloft in science. It's a symbol. It's not a literal titan holding the world. It's a beautiful symbol of the heights that this culture had achieved. And it's curiously found among the Aztecs, who come from Aztlan, which is exactly where Edgar Cayce, a man who had never studied Mesoamerican history, from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, who was uneducated, who had a 6th grade education, said they went around 10,000 BC. So when people say, well, you're finding evidence of it in, sunken city off the coast of Cuba, strange things in Antarctica, which, by the way, 12,000 years ago, Antarctica was not covered in ice.
You're right.
It's unlikely that most of it was covered in ice at that time. It appears that the disturbance from, the end of the last ice age affected certain water currents, and that led to this kind of, ice formation. At least that's one theory. But yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. And it's also possible and likely, and talked about in some of these readings, that, just like today, we have, Los Angeles or Dubai, we have jets flying in the air, but then we also have indigenous people in the Amazon and cannibals in New Guinea that don't care about any of those things, So it's basically the same world that we are in today. Land masses are configured differently, and people's evolution had gone a different way. They understood a lot more than us, it appears, from what I've gathered in the book, about where we come from. They were aware of extraterrestrials and they communicated with them. Not all the time. It's not the whole civilization was extraterrestrial, but they were aware of that. They clearly had some sort of spacefaring capacity. And they were using technology that Tesla basically was proposing. And in fact, Tesla, according to pretty good evidence, did get a past life reading from Edgar Cayce, who said, you are a reincarnated Atlantean.
Very interesting. Our time is running down. I can't believe how fast it's gone. We might have to get you back on for part B of this. I got to ask you a question. How long did it take you to write this book?
7 years.
Wow. And
7 years.
And that's a lot of research.
Yeah. The hardest part was reading thousands of channeled messages from the 1930s and 40s in a trance state, transcriptions from an archive, and digging some up that nobody has ever talked about, and then fully flexing my traditional training as a historian and like crowbarring all of this together, but then also making it entertaining, because I really get very bored when I read just lists of dates and Solon said this. That's not what my job was. My job was to show people in an entertaining and engaging way, like a conversation, like a story, like, look, this is actually, if you want one book, for the holidays on this subject, from start to finish, with some speculation, but some hard evidence, that's what I was trying to do. And I think, part of the reason, it went to #1 bestseller in prehistory was the tone. It was just, I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not here to debunk or prove anything. I'm just here to show you, as a kind of curator, look, this is what we got. And a lot of it is very hard to explain, which I think is the tone we should take with all subjects.
Now, do you think they'll ever find actual proof that Atlantis actually existed?
I think if we applied the same level of integrity and honesty that we do with other ancient subjects like ancient Greece, ancient Troy, we would just say right now, yeah, there's overwhelming evidence that it existed. But because the date is so far back and because it was catastrophically destroyed, I think it's a combination of, we don't want to admit that the same fate could befall us at any moment, and there's little we could do. And I think also we don't want to rewrite all of our history books and admit wow, how wrong we've been. We weren't just hunter-gatherers for 300,000 years, and then suddenly Sumeria pops up and has a fully functioning legal system and megalithic architecture, and then the pyramids pop up out of nowhere, and we don't even know how to do that. Like, that's a very inaccurate, I think, and dishonest story, but that's unfortunately how we educate our population. And so, I think my goal was just kind of, hey, look, here's an alternative. We've always actually had a quite highly advanced civilization akin to 20th century technology. Different. World was different groups of people, different configurations. But that gap between, say, 10,000 BC and Sumeria, that was actually the exception to the rule.
Well, you know,
and we are rebuilding from scratch now. We're not at the apex. We're rediscovering. That's why I call the book Reclaiming Our Lost Ancient Legacy.
Again, I think scholars and the governments don't want us really to know about the past. I keep thinking of the movie, one of the movies, the Planet of the Apes, where they go into a cave and, they find a baby doll, which then proved humans were more advanced than apes were. And it makes me wonder, maybe people out there, certain organizations, groups, or whatever, really knows more about past history, and they don't want to divulge it because it would change everything from religion, everything we ever learned in school, college. It will change the whole world. That's the scary part.
Absolutely. And I find it interesting that the only authentic map of Atlantis in a document that's ever been recovered from history was discovered by a Jesuit priest in the Renaissance in the Vatican Library. And was said to have come from Egypt, probably during the time when Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra and took a bunch of documents, including, a obelisk, back to Rome. So it's like, there's probably evidence in the Vatican of Atlantis, but also, according...
We're out of time. Can you share if you have a website and the name of the book and where they can find it? Let's get that out.
Yeah, absolutely. The book is Visions of Atlantis, Reclaiming Our Lost Ancient Legacy. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and a bunch of other foreign bookstores. And you can look it up for more information on Michael Le Flem with the last name one word.com. You can subscribe and you can send me any notes you have. I always look forward to interacting with, people. And it's also available in Spanish and in audiobook, as well as Kindle, softcover, hardcover.
Well, Michael, we're going to have to get you on because we can continue on for at least another hour or so.
Yeah, sure. I got a date, so I got to go.
Okay, my friend, you take care, okay?
All right, brother. Thank you so much.
Okay, you have a great holiday season.
You too, Gary.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll be right back after this break, and then we got another guest, and it's going to be a great show tonight, so get some popcorn, get yourself in that easy chair, prop up the feet, put a log in the fire, because we're going to roll tonight.
Desert hills and lonely places, heavy still without your traces.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Mystery surrounds reports of powder falling from the sky over U.S. Concerns were raised on Thursday when residents of Maryland, Northern Virginia, and West Virginia began reporting that a strange powder had started settling on top of their vehicles. So numerous were the reports that the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection decided to launch its own investigation into the phenomenon. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com.
Friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night. Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
And we are back. Well, I hope everybody had a great time during that break. I tell you, I had to go a potty break. I was like going as fast as I could to get back here. No snake, though. I can honestly tell you that, JC. Not a single snake.
Yeah, or you'd still be in there at tug of war.
I know. So, who's our next guest here?
Hey, our next guest is Mark D'Antonio. Is coming back on for a little bit of updates what's going on in space.
Well, Mark, my friend, have you been staying out of trouble, and have you gone to any of the stores and tried to do Christmas shopping yet?
Hey, Gary, thank you for having me on, but I got to tell you, I haven't gone out yet. No, I haven't even stepped out of this house. I won't do it because it's crazy out there. It's a madhouse. So, no. But am I staying out of trouble? Well, maybe not, but I'm doing my best.
Okay. What is going on in the sky and beyond?
Oh, I got to tell you, there's some really cool stuff. And, you and I talked earlier a little bit. You kind of were bringing up a few things that you thought were really cool. And those are hot buttons for me. And what you were talking about, we'll share with the listeners, is the prospects of life in our own solar system. Now, no, it's not going to be other human beings, not going to be creatures that we can go and have a conversation with. No, but life in general. I mean, that's important, right? To find life. And so we look, let's go out to Saturn. I mean, the planet Saturn's really, really far out there, okay? And Saturn has a tiny moon called Enceladus. It's only 300 miles across. But we see from the Cassini mission that went to Saturn that it has this incredible structure to it, meaning it has what looks like, well, of course, it has an icy mantle because it's very cold out there and not really an atmosphere to speak of. But it has this icy mantle, but below the ice seems to be an ocean. And that ocean has been spewing through cracks in the South Pole, through cracks that are warmer than different areas on the moon, on that moon. So that implies that maybe Enceladus has hydrothermal vents like we do right here on Earth in our deep oceans. Now that's pretty cool. Now that's Saturn. If we come even closer to Jupiter, Jupiter's 5 astronomical units away. That's 5 times 93 million miles. So it's pretty far out there. Jupiter has a moon called Europa, and Europa is 2,000 miles across. And it's being squished and kneaded like bread dough by Jupiter itself, and then the other larger moons, Ganymede and Callisto, which those are called the Galilean satellites with Io closest. Then you have Europa, and then you have Ganymede and Callisto. Now, those 4 moons all going around each other do a little bit of a dance. And as Europa goes around Jupiter, it's being pulled on by Jupiter and those other moons, causing it to squish just a little bit. That squishing on a planet-wide or moon-wide scale causes an incredible amount of stress inside, which causes an incredible amount of friction and heat release. keeping Europa moist and warm inside. So it looks like underneath the icy cover of Europa, like Enceladus, even further out, Europa has what appears to be a gigantic ocean that could be 60 miles deep under the ice. Now, that's a huge amount of ocean, Gary. So, I mean, we're talking, pressures in excess at Europa's distance and with its mass, considering, how much water weighs on top of something that's in the water there. You measure the pressure by how much weight is over your head, basically. At Europa, the bottom of the 60-mile deep ocean, the pressure would be 20,000 psi, pounds per square inch. Now, in the bottom of our deep ocean trenches, we're only 7 miles down, not 60. And we're looking at around 7,000 pounds per square inch at those depths, right? So in Europa, it's a lot more, but then again, Europa is much smaller. So that process that I talked about of where the moon gets squished, that's also heating it up. So the water underneath that ice on Europa is also going to be at some point down in that layer warm enough for life to exist, right? So that's pretty cool. So we might have, again, microscopic life that formed in the dark on Europa. And you might say, well, can microscopic life form in the dark? Yeah. Look at our hydrothermal vents. We have tube worms. Okay, we have bacteria that love to, eat this bacteria, this mineral-laden hot water coming out of these hydrothermal vents. And then there's things all around these vents, life forms, that eat the bacteria.
Now, just think about that, though. Maybe that
Isn't
bacteria.
that crazy?
Yeah, but maybe that, they could advance eventually, and into other things.
And you're absolutely right. We can't, I've been, for decades, I've been fighting the arrogance that you might find sometimes within science. I learned at an early age of being an arrogant science guy myself that the possibilities out there are way more than you are giving credit to this universe in creating. And so I realized early on that I have to not be an arrogant science guy anymore. So you're right. It could possibly advance, but what causes life to advance? In other words, why don't dolphins on our planet have the ability to build vehicles and do advanced physics? It's because their environment and the pressures they felt as dolphins, for them to rise to the top of their niche, it didn't require any further development for them to get to where they are. They're already pretty advanced. Now, could they evolve in the future? Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to jump in
here. They may evolve rather quickly.
Well, Michael, I mean, Mark, I'm going to jump in here too. Just like JC, if we took his arms and legs off, how is he going to advance? It's the same way with dolphins.
If his offspring might, because his offspring might still be born with arms and legs. However, if his offspring were born without arms and legs because of a mutation, if that happened, then JC's kids might look like little worms wriggling around on the ground, and we might say, ooh, how are they going to get along? But what if they were also born with the ability to live in the water? Then that shape would be a perfect shape, conducive to being able to swim fast in the water, kind of like a seal does. And if that happened, then we might see intelligence rise in the ocean from that way. So you see, evolution doesn't mean that we just rise to what we are as humans and never progress any further. Evolution is still happening, even though we know the word. And it keeps on happening all over the planet. There's species evolving as we speak.
What else is going?
It happens for a long time.
What else is going up on in the sky? I know the sun is going crazy yet, and it's not calming down. We know that.
Yeah, that there's a coronal hole in the sun. And what's a coronal hole? Well, I mean, the sun has different layers, right? The sun has, of course, a core. It has this outer area, right? It has the photosphere, the part we see with our eyes. It's very bright. But it also has a corona. And the corona is the part that you see during an eclipse when the moon sits in front of the sun. It's that beautiful, the rays of plasma sticking out from the sun all around you. Well, that's 360 degrees all around the sun. And when that happens, the magnetic fields are bunched up in there, and the sun's magnetic field doesn't really get out too much. But in a coronal hole, that's an area where the solar flux, that is the high energy particles, the protons and the electrons that are freely moving in that outer part of the sun, they're free to race out at more than twice the speed that they normally do. This is the reason why people have been reporting an incredible amount of auroras around our country right now. It's because of that. When the auroras hit the North Pole, when the particles hit the North Pole, they spiral in via the magnetic field, and they just cause these beautiful glows in our atmosphere. And it happens at the South Pole too. So up north, we have the aurora borealis, and down south, we have the aurora australis. So the sun is taking part in causing our skies to have an incredible set of light shows right now.
People are getting great pictures, and our time is up, and I really do, Mark, I appreciate you calling in and all that stuff. Send me that email I've been asking you for too, will you please?
Oh, I did. I sent it to you. We're good.
Okay, we're good on that. And why don't you tell people?
Yeah, sent it to you. Excellent.
Tell people how they can find your what you do.
Sure. I'm with skytourlive.org, and we have remote observatories around the country, and we show people the universe live in real time. And you can find us at skytourlive.org.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And again, get a hold of us. If anything, they find anything more interesting, or if anything goes really wonky with the sun, let us know, will you?
I will. Thank you, Gary, for having me. It's been wonderful to take part.
Okay, my friend, you take care.
Okay.
Well, we'll be right back. And when we come back, guess what? We're going to be taking calls. Now, a warning, when you hear this, that means we're going to have to take the next caller. So we'll be right back.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
Now, on Night Dreams, it's open lines, it's open subject, but no political or religious. Let's have fun. Remember, we are Night Dreamers. The lines are open. Call now, 716-405-0253. That's 716-405-0253. Once again, here's our host, Gary Anderson.
And I am back. And again, too, if you want to talk about what's going on in your life, what you're doing for Christmas shipping, Christmas shopping. I'll tell you, my wife was out for a few days out of state buying Christmas gifts. Madhouse already. I think people are spending more money now than they did in the last couple of years because we had COVID and all that stuff. But I tell you, now's the time to do it. I don't know this year if I am going to go shopping or use Amazon again. I tell you, I used Amazon the last couple of years, and some part of that, it takes the feeling of Christmas away from you when you do that. It's not like when you're out looking like, wow, what do I buy my wife? What do I buy my family members? It's just like, oh, there it is. That looks like it might work. Well, anyway, we got a caller. Who do we have, JC?
We have Tom on the line. Tom, what's your subject?
Yeah, what do you want to talk about, Tom?
I was going to talk about building a cabin in the woods, but since you had that fabulous guest Michael on, he struck a chord with me, and I wanted to talk about past lives, if that's okay.
Yeah. Have you had one?
I've had several.
Well, let's hear about one of them.
Well, when Michael was talking about the trams, when he was talking about the flying machines and he was giving descriptions, I remember as a child, I used to have I'll call them waking dreams of everything that he mentioned, and it was extremely vivid. I was probably 3 or 4 years old when this was going on, but he basically gave a very apt description of those things that I saw, and I think there's something to that. I think that people that have had past lives, sometimes they remember them and sometimes they don't. I think that,
well, I don't know. It's not from JC. Was that from you, Ren?
People trying to call in, that's what it is.
Okay, well, if you're going to call in, let's wait till our caller is off, and then, give it like about 5 seconds, and then call in fast where you can get in. Anyway, so this, go ahead, Tom.
But anyway, Michael, what a fabulous guest. I think that everything that he talked about, and obviously he's done his homework, and he's done a great deal of research. Fascinating subject. And the cool thing about past lives is that I probably don't remember all of them, but there's some that I have caught glimpses of. I remember being a privateer during the reign of Elizabeth I back in the 16th century. I remember being a Roman soldier. I remember being in the Byzantine Empire. And so, a lot of those things, and being in the Civil War. And so I think that maybe not everybody, has had that experience, or they've been here before, but I think that there are a lot of people that have.
Well, you know what, Tom? You got to get it right, for you don't have to keep coming back. Think about it. I mean, come on.
I'm working on that one, Gary. That's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, I'm going to let you go. I just want to say thank you for calling in.
All right. You have a good night.
Okay.
Night Dreamers, the call-in line is open. Chat with Gary.
And it is. And again, the number here to call in if you want to talk to me, and we can talk about anything except religion. Well, booty calls from somebody else. And politics. We really don't want to touch on that. But the number here is 716-405-0253. That's 716-405-0253. Call in. Give me something to do here. Otherwise, you're just going to be looking at me. And I'll tell you what, I don't have much to say here tonight. I'm kind of tired. So please call in. And, JC, think about, past lives. How do you know you really had a past life? Because we've been so contaminated from movies and TVs for so many decades. How do you know then when you have a dream or you think of a past life, it's not, some movie, Cleopatra with, and all those movies that's been in the past. And we don't have JC again.
No, I'm here. I'm trying to answer these calls, but nobody will talk. They keep calling, but they won't say nothing.
Well, maybe they got a problem with their phone.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it might be Barb, but I don't know. She keeps calling, but now she's not calling, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, if you want to call, we can even take recipes about,
Coming in now, let me.
Okay. But think about that, past lives. Could it be contamination of, our media for all these years? Like I was a Roman fighting, or I was this, or I was that. I mean, let's face it, movies, TV shows, I do think it could contaminate. We all have dreams. Have you ever had a dream that you woke up and you couldn't even decipher if it was actually real or not? And when you dream, could that actually be real? And what we're doing right now is a dream. Well, in that case, you're dreaming you're listening to the show. I don't know. We have Barb on the line. Barb, how are you doing?
Hi. Not too great. I debated about whether to call it or not because I really don't want to bring everybody down or seem to be asking for sympathy, but I just wanted to share where I'm at and what's going on with me right now.
Well, you're a night dreamer, and we're kind of a family here. That's why I changed the show. I restructured the show, where we still have the guest on. We have all the topics, but on Friday, I want to kind of give back to the listeners. I grew up with a show. It was really good, and that talk show was people would call up and they would talk about recipes. They would talk about things that's going good or bad in their life. They would talk about whatever, and that was Nightcap with Herb Jeffcrow. And I tell you, when we had that one guest and we talked about it on the show, it clicked in me. We need this type of thing. So what is going on, Barb?
Well, today I had to sign the paperwork to put my mom into hospice. She's in the nursing home already, but hospice is going to take care of her there through the nursing home where she's at. They're going to add their services to the nursing homes.
Wow.
And I don't know, they didn't sound too positive today about how long because now she has pneumonia.
That happens, Yeah,
Huh?
a lot of people get it when they're in the hospital. A lot of, regardless how well that you're taken care of in the hospital, you're susceptible to a lot of things. And that seems to be one of them. But, again, Barb, I had the same issue when I was a young kid. My father's mother, the same thing. She was in the hospital. And they didn't have hospice then because this is years and years ago. But the doctor kept, calling my dad and says, she's dying. We don't know how much time. And then the doctor said, she's given up. And that happens to a lot of people. I mean, I'll be honest with you. At one point in my life, I can see it. If all of a sudden my family doesn't want to take care of me, and I don't mean it that way, but, there comes to a point, like my grandmother, I had to put her in a nursing home. It got to the point it was more safer for her being in the nursing home than being home because I couldn't give her the help and, the care she needed. But then you're in there and let's face it, it's hard. It's hard for them. It's hard for you. It's hard for anybody who has to go through that.
Yeah. She said that she just wanted to be in heaven now. And she quit eating. So, I guess it's kind of like, I'm not sure how to process it. I've never done this before, except when my dad died, this is a whole different ball game.
Well, I don't want to sound cold, but we're born and we die, and we have no control being born because blame that on your parents. And when we die, it's the same way. I mean, you go from one to the extreme, and it's hard. And I know what you're feeling, and all you can do is give as much love as you can to your mom.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's not making much sense right now. She's not, I guess they said she's pretty confused. She keeps talking about how she can read sheet music and all this stuff, but before that happened on Thanksgiving, I talked to her and she told me she loved me and she understood me when I told her I loved her. So I think that's been accomplished.
Well, that's a big thing too, because my father, I don't know if you remember the story. We had him in a nursing home. He first was diagnosed with dementia and then Alzheimer's. And, at one point it was so bad, I would go there with my kids to visit him. He didn't know who I was. He thought my kids were Martians. And he was living in a past that never really existed. And then he went into a vegetable state. And then, the day he passed on, I was there because they called me and said, hey, you need to come here. Your dad's coherent. I don't understand how the human brain works. I really don't.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's, you know, I think it's a combination of physical and spiritual. You know, they combine, and all kinds of things can happen.
Does she know you now? If you go in there and see her, does she know who you are?
No, well, that's part of the hard part. I can't go see her because my granddaughter who lives with me has AIDS, and my daughter has HIV, and I can't risk that. Nursing home where she's at is COVID central. They take COVID patients there from the hospital to recover.
Wow.
And I haven't been able to go see her, so the only contact I've been able to have with her is on the phone and to have things delivered to her. You know, it's really hard.
Yeah, is there anybody there where you can do it by, you know, like on a cell phone where you can go, you know, a video conference type of thing and just, you know, have closure that way?
You know what? Now that she's in hospice, they might do that. You know, I asked them about it before, and they were all just too busy, you know, between the COVID patients and the elderly. You know, and they're short staffed because of the COVID thing and because the shortage of people that didn't want to get the shot and blah, blah, blah. You know the story.
Oh, yeah. I would see if they could do, like a little video conference. And you know what I'd do? I would set it up at a time, you know, and date, and maybe send like over to the hospital, like a little gift wrapped up with a little card, and you know, and they give it to her while you're on video conference. And, you know, that might even cheer her up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I was going to send her a Christmas card tomorrow.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be like anything, you know, just something. Or something that she cherished at home. And you wrap it up and give a card and, you know, and see if they can do a video conference. So
that's a good idea. I'll talk to them about that.
Yeah, please do that. And hey, Barb, I want to thank you so much for calling in. You know, we are sending our love to you.
Thank you.
And to your mom. Okay. Because you, like I said, you're family here.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You take care.
You too.
Okay. Sending my love. Yeah, that is really hard. You know, like I had to go through it, and I had to go through it twice. I went through it. My mom, I wasn't able to, when she went, I wasn't able to make it to her location. I did about a half an hour after she passed, but my grandmother, I had to put her in a nursing home, and that was hard. And she had dementia, and it came on really fast because my grandfather died of cancer. And she was taking care of him, and she was doing the housework, and she was cooking and doing all that. And like the day he died, she like started going downhill. Within 2 weeks, it could be pouring down rain or it could be a sunny day. She didn't even know what it was like. She quit, you know, changing her hygiene, all that. And all that happened really fast. And then within a month, she didn't even know who I was anymore. And that is really scary when you have to go through something like that. But all you can do is try to, you know, both for you and your loved one, is show them that you care. And a lot of people don't think about if you can't go see her, then maybe a video conference is the best way to do it. They can hold up another cell phone. You can do it that way, and just a little bit of love and all that stuff. I don't know how you feel about something like that, JC.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do except pretty much what you were saying. I mean, especially in this different situation that she was in, being the COVID and with their daughter's illnesses too. It's tough situation.
It is a real tough one too. I mean, you know, to have to go through. Again, if you want to give a call, we'll continue on the air as long as, you know, we keep getting some calls here. And the number is 716-405-0253, 716-405-0253. We can talk about virtually anything, long as it's not religion and politics. I don't want to get into it. if you have a recipe for Christmas or anything like that on anything, you can even call in and get, give us some feedback on what to cook for Christmas dinner and all that stuff.
Yeah, gumbo pie.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of people on chat, but please, why don't one of you guys come in and, let's talk. We can talk about anything pretty much. What do you think, JC?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about snakes. We can talk about bears. We can.
Yeah, drunken bears, alcoholic bears. Why is it always in Montana and Idaho? I never have it in Nebraska. We never have it in Washington State. They're always going, maybe it's, like Bigfoot, they got certain areas and maybe, I don't know. That's weird. Can you still imagine, though, a bear breaking into a restaurant? I would think they would be hungry if they've been hibernating and go for the food, sniff the food and go for it. No, they go for beer.
Well, maybe he was an alcoholic. Maybe he's got a long history of robbing campers of their beer. So now, think about it. He's either coming in or going out of this. Oh, we're getting a caller. Hold on.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I will say this. I remember back a couple of years ago, going onto a freeway on-ramp, there was a guy holding a sign that says, "In case of emergency, buy me a beer. I have an emergency." I mean, at least he was open on that. So, that's really interesting. So again, I don't know. The older you get, have you noticed that Christmas just doesn't have quite the impact when you were a little kid? That's what I remember so much. When I was a young kid, I would sneak to the Christmas tree when my parents were sleeping at night, and I would have a roll of Scotch tape, and I so quietly open up to see what my gift was. And I would look at it, and then I would get a smirk on my face, and then I'd package it all back up. And then one year, my mom came up to me and she said, "Gary, I know you've been doing this every year. Does it mean as much when you open the present when we give out the presents?" I said, "No, it really didn't. It really took the fun out of it." We got another caller. Who do we have, JC?
We have Space Case Zero on the line. He's from the chat, so it's up to you now, Space.
Well, Space Case, how are you doing?
Well, I don't know, recovering. So I've got some physics things that I think you might find interesting.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Michael Faraday, the guy that came up with the link between electricity and magnetism?
Yes.
So, long time ago, don't know how many years ago, he came up with these simple little experiments to show the link between the two. He came up with 27 equations in what's called quaternion, which I don't know that sort of algebra, but anyway, apparently it was a horrible mess to deal with. So a guy named Heaviside came along, a mathematician, and he simplified these equations into the ones we know now. And at the time, he made an assumption, and he said, there's basically, the magnetism has a direction, it has a magnitude, but let's get rid of the whole idea that it has any sort of pressure or density. And he did this telling people that this doesn't exist because you basically can't engineer like a power grid if the equations are such a mess. So I've been running some experiments trying to come up with the idea of magnetic pressure. Does it exist or not? And it seems to exist. And I don't know how many people have gone back and run these 150-year-old tests and tried it. But what's really weird, when you make a device that actually starts messing with this magnetic pressure, my goodness, it has ruined my health and destroyed me for maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 days after I run these experiments.
What happens?
Anyway.
What happens? You said it destroys your house and you. What goes on?
No energy at all. Absolutely wipes me out. Infections take over. It's not very pleasant. Anyway, it's almost like it rips my energy field from me. So what I'm doing, I've got 4 devices that do this now. The one that works the best is a 1-foot piece of 1/2-inch rebar, and I've got electromagnetic coils on each side. And I turn them both on at the same time, and then I turn one of them off first. And I was expecting the magnetic forces, because, the speed of light here is involved, that shouldn't it move one direction because the one disappears and the other's still pulling against something that's not there anymore?
Yeah,
So
I would think it would.
It does move. So I got interested in this. I'm like, well, what if I set up something inert? Because my friends are telling me it's all experimental error. Must be, right? So I set up a teacup, ceramic, hanging from the ceiling. And I could move the teacup with this thing. Now, that's not magnetic or electric. Why is it moving?
Well, let's look at it. Okay, I could see, because let's get this for I understand right. You put coils on this rebar, right? So you wound like a transformer, correct? And placed
Correct.
it on each side.
Right.
I could see something if it's metal, okay, depending on the metal, being attracted or not being attracted, depending on where it's placed, because it could each equally be pulling at the same time. But something like porcelain or something like that, which has no, metal into it, I don't see how that's interesting.
Well, right. And I wasn't expecting it at all until you go back to these equations of the magnetic force. And if there's a magnetic pressure, well, it's going to move pretty much everything. And this might be what gravity is. And it was just kind of amazing to play with and see. I didn't expect it to mess me up. I'm not running these experiments again. I posted them up on YouTube, but, I was blown away by it. And it's one of these really weird things. And the moment I did this, one of my friends sent me a document. It's like, oh, hey, somebody else already figured this out. Everybody uses different language. When they talk about warped space or a time field or all this other stuff, turns out like the magnetic pressure component, that's how you warp space. That's how you do it. It's super easy to access. It's not super crazy difficult like the physicists seem to assume.
Well, I agree with you, but here's something else I wanted to say to you. It seems like you know a little bit about electronics and stuff like that. Years ago, you remember the old TVs, which, had a picture tube in it, color TVs?
Yes.
Okay. They, before they invented a way to what they call degaussing, because a TV would actually, because the magnetic field, it was generated in the picture tube, the pictures would kind of kind of merge and kind of, get blurry. So you'd have to have a guy come out and degauss the picture tube to get it all back in. And I decided, well, I'm going to build a degausser, which was a round circle about like maybe 12 inches, 13 inches in diameter with windings of a coil. So it was nothing more than a transformer. And I plug it in the wall and I would, kind of go on top of the TV in the circular motion, the sides of the picture tube and then the front of it and the bottom of it. And that would degauss the picture tube. Afterwards, I'll be honest with you, I felt weird. And it was for hours I felt weird. And I think it was because of the magnetic field.
Yeah, and the standard magnetic field, as standard physics looks at it, it's only got a direction, but people have this energy field around them. And I've been playing with this for a while. I had a dream tell me how to build a device. And the whole idea is you take two compasses, put them about 1 foot apart, go walk around with them until they don't point the same direction, which I was surprised I found a point where they did that. And then take a high voltage power supply, something portable. Mine tops out at 300,000 volts. You want yourself positive and you point negative to the sky and turn it on. And it poured down the most crazy feeling energy ever. I've tried this with a lot of my friends, and I know it's the exact same instructions to get hit by lightning, so it's not exactly safe. But my goodness, people are like, I feel healthy. It supercharged us. My mom had been having problems because she had a stroke a few years ago. She went from like the edge of death to completely fine in 30 minutes.
Well, going back, Space Case, going back to the 20s and even a little bit before that, one of the things they were experimenting for health, for curing, different illnesses and all that was basically what we're talking about. And, then science says, oh, it doesn't do anything. But, in your blood, you have all kinds of minerals, all kinds of stuff. And, they've now been talking here recently that maybe it is beneficial.
Well, I've played with a lot of this sort of thing because I suppose I'm just a hair's breadth short of a mad scientist.
No problem with that.
I feel like, do you think I'm over the line?
No.
Okay.
Some of the best inventions were people that did things that other people look like, you don't know what you're doing. And guess what? We have invented some major stuff through the years, just people doing what you're doing.
I agree. And one of the interesting things I've discovered, a researcher guy I was watching before I found you on YouTube, because I don't know why YouTube didn't show me your shows for a while. But anyway,
you know what YouTube's doing? I'm glad. I don't want to interrupt you, because what you're talking about is important. You know what YouTube does? That lets people build up to a certain amount, and then all of a sudden, I go look on the studio portion, and I lost a whole bunch of people. And then people start messaging me like, "Why did you kick me off of YouTube?" I never kicked them off. You know what I think is going on, but I don't want to say.
Well, I lost 100 subscriptions in a single day when I started talking about the physics. So there you go.
Yeah, it seems like with certain guests or certain subjects, people disappear. And, people look at it and say, oh, gee, you only have like this amount of people on subscribers. They don't realize on the internet side, like iHeart and all these other, we are tuning in between 200 to 1,000 plus a night to over a couple million, depending on who our guest is, downloads. And, it's crazy. I'm very frustrated with YouTube, but I could write a book on YouTube, honestly.
Well, yeah, but like Google in general, if I email someone that I don't know, I don't show up in their inbox. I don't show up in their spam, social. The only way they find me is in the all mail folder, because they don't want me talking with people. Apparently, I give people ideas. They're not interested in people learning. So it's kind of funny. But, that's, they've run the thing, so I guess they get to do that.
So what are you going to do with what you're doing now with your device you're working on?
Well, I'm kind of at a bit of a standstill, because the thing is kind of destroying me. But then, so I don't want to run those tests anymore. But these all have frequencies to them, and it's making, like what people used to in the 1900s would have called the ether. I think it's just magnetic pressure, whether it's warp space. I think these are all the same names, and the more documents I read, I realize it's all the same. So the alternating field seemed to mess with biology. So why don't I try a direct current field, something that just goes one direction? The only way I can figure out how to do that is you make a vortex, and then you get a pressure drop in the middle. And there's a couple other ways you might be able to go about this and make this happen without a frequency involved. Hopefully that's less disruptive to biology. So that's what I'm going to try next.
No, you better be careful, Space Case, because Madman Malcolm was going to come on my show years ago. And then all of a sudden, he disappeared again. But by taking high voltage and taking magnetic fields and doing what he was doing, right, he claims he invented a time machine.
Right. So he's still around. One of my friends that lives in Brazil that I met over the internet, that I forget how he found me. Anyway, he's chatting with the guy occasionally. So he will talk with people still. And I tend to think, with my personal experience with what's happened with me and the machines I've built and what it did to me, I'm guessing that machine he built literally scrambled his ability to think. I think he's not as coherent as he once was. I've heard a lot of his interviews, looked at a lot of his stuff. I think I know how it works, because he made this giant rotational electric field running what he said was 3 million watts of power.
Yeah, that's enough to vaporize the whole building.
Concentric rings running around, and then he jumped through the middle of it. Oh my gosh, was that not a bright idea? And I think it messed with his brain, because if what's happening to me around these machines, because I've made counter-rotating electromagnetic vortexes and all this other stuff, when you start playing with this stuff, it's not human-friendly. Not at all. And I think it messed him up.
Well, it did. Art Bell was a friend of mine, and, me and Art talked a lot. And in fact, like I said, I was going to have Madman on my show, and then boom, the last I was talking to him, he was in Hawaii, and then I lost his email, to be honest with you, and I had never been able to get it again. But, again, with the last time he was on Art Bell's show, it was kind of like, yeah, his intelligence was there, but his memory wasn't there like it was.
Right. Well, I heard that interview. And by the way, Art Bell caused me to miss so much sleep in my life. So that I missed the first.
I got to be honest with you. After the show was over, we would talk on the phone. He would call me up. And you never knew who was calling you, because the way his phone system was, it had all these different phone numbers. And then, he'd want to talk about the guest or the topic and all this stuff. I never got any sleep.
Oh, that's even worse than me. I got to go to sleep in the middle of it if I was too tired. But, my favorite show he ever did, he told people, only people that have actually traveled in time call in. And then like halfway through the show, he's like, I asked for it.
Yeah.
But my goodness, was that a fantastic show. Yeah, I can only imagine having phone calls about all this afterward. I found him sometime in the 1980s. I forget when, mid-80s at some point. And I was so sad I missed so much of that, but it was, that was fantastic. What a wonderful man and great content. And then when I ran across you, YouTube suggested you to me. So they're doing that right, because you do very, very good shows. And anyway, I really appreciate it.
Well, we try, but can you imagine what I get a kick at is these time travelers, right? Is coming from the future, and they're showing pictures of what the Earth is going to look like. Now, unless they don't have any digital technology left, which then I don't know how they're time traveling, why are they showing pictures from the year like 2527, for example, with a Polaroid picture? Have you ever noticed any of that?
No, my Polaroid camera stopped working long ago. I don't know why you'd use a Polaroid, but I built a device, I don't know what it was, about mid-1990. It uses counter-rotating, it's a Wimhurst machine. It was modified. So one side is positive and the other is negative. But it didn't stick to that. It started alternating. And it messes with time plus or minus about 3 seconds. Digital clocks, mechanical clocks, digital displays on things like multimeters just go completely crazy. They don't work at all. And this is something I'm literally looking at the thing right now, and people cannot tell me it does not exist or I did not experience it. Now, that was just speeding up and slowing down time. It didn't go backward or forward, but it wouldn't surprise me much that this is possible, because I've seen it happen.
That's interesting. But, hey, it's Space Case. Our time, guess what? Our time is like gone for talking. But can you do me a favor? Give us a call next Sunday and we'll continue this on.
Absolutely.
Okay, Space Case, I want to thank you for being a night dreamer.
Good night, all.
Good night. Wait, to think about that. Going back in time, why are they holding, or going forward in time, I should say, or coming back from the future to our time? And they're saying, this is what the Earth is going to look like if you don't take care of it, right? And they're holding a photograph from a Polaroid picture a couple hundred years from the future. I mean, like, where are they getting film for these Polaroid cameras? And how are they doing it? Why don't they have something, a hologram or something, and have more proof where they can... JC, think about that. They could just hold up a hologram and say, this is what the future of the Earth is going to be if you don't take care of it. Why a Polaroid picture?
Yeah, that is $1 million question. Maybe it's the only thing that worked. Maybe that's why they come back to like 1972 to get some new Polaroid film.
That's what they're doing. They have to go back to the 1999 to 2004. You get the Polaroid film. They do have Polaroid film out now. Well, it's not by the Polaroid company, but they're called Polaroid. But it's very expensive, and I don't know. I find that it is every week, JC. Somebody's claiming that they're a time traveler, especially if you go on TikTok. I mean, it's really interesting.
Yeah, and didn't even John Titor have to come back to like 1975 to get one of them IBM?
Teeter? You mean Teeter?
Or Teeter, yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden he vanished too. After all his predictions. Just like, whoop, he's gone. Maybe he went back or, Back to the Future.
Well, yeah. Well, you got to have a DeLorean for that. Go 88 mile an hour.
Yeah. Well, or in my case, a Volvo or something like that.
A Volvo going backwards.
Backwards. It's hard enough to get it to go forward. You know that.
Yeah, you got to find the right hill.
Yeah, buy a car. It costs $200 to replace the turn signal bulb. Yeah, go do that. Well, and again, if anybody has any recipes, I'd like to hear some nice recipes for Christmas. So if you want to call in on that, our call-in line is open. We'll take at least one more call or more. As long as you keep calling in, we'll keep going. I have nothing better to do than watching Creature Features with my friend Vincent after the show. Anyway, the number here again is 716-405-0253. That is 716-405-0253. And, we'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Night Dreams Radio with Gary Anderson.
Well, thank you, Aunt Bertha. I really like that promo. Well, who do we have?
We have Rory on. Rory, are you there?
Rory, finally able to talk to you. How are you doing? And are you getting prepared for Christmas?
I am. How are you doing?
Well, my wife won't let me put up any Christmas decorations up on the house because, well, one year I set the deck. Our deck goes 3/4 around our house. I set it on fire with the Christmas lights. And then I wanted antique Christmas tree lights, not the LED. You remember the bulbs when you're young? You screw the bulb in, they get warm, and if one goes out, they all go out.
I do.
Well, I put it on the Christmas tree, right? And I didn't give the tree enough water, I guess, according to what the fire department said. But my wife for years been saying, I really would like a new kitchen. And I really would like one. She got one because it burnt the kitchen down. And then she was mad at me. And I said, look, you got a new kitchen. You got your Christmas present right there.
It was all planned, Gary. You know that.
Well, maybe by her, but not by me. So what are you up to?
Oh, I'm just kind of enjoying the season. It's a little lighter this year. No snow, no power outages. It's pretty nice. But I just wanted to make a comment. Our longtime listener, I gotta go. I gotta come back into the room because it's hard because the if I'm at the computer, the sound reverberates back and forth.
Well, that's the electrical magnetic field of the ionic sphere giving a charge to your computer and phone.
I gotta go. I gotta come back into the room because it's hard because the if I'm at the computer.
Yeah, I hear it.
Oh, geez, I gotta turn this off.
Yeah.
That's the electrical magnetic field up there.
But whereabouts are you located in the country?
Oh, I'm in I want to say Olala, Washington, but it's nobody knows that. It's Oolala, Washington, I guess. Kind of like in Gig Harbor, just an outskirts of Gig Harbor.
Oh, you're just down the street from me and down the hill.
Yeah. No, yes, I am very, very. I guess I'm on Peacock Hill.
Oh, gee. Well, God, don't tell me you're the neighbor that lives behind me. If you are, buy the gravel next year. But anyway, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm pretty close to you. We got our little mini farm here at the compound.
Oh yeah, I've got like chickens here. They're giving me like really, really fresh eggs. You can't get the eggs. The eggs that they produce do not even compare to the eggs you can get in the grocery store.
Oh yeah, my son used to raise chickens, and we'd get our eggs that way. I just got horses and goats.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when I moved out here from Tacoma, about I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, I wanted to move out to the country.
You mean you didn't like drive-by shootings in Tacoma?
Yeah. I moved out to the country, but it seems like the country or the city moved to me. I mean, now we got like the Home Depot and Albertsons and all the grocery stores and everything.
McDonald's, Starbucks. Yeah. You know, when I moved here 23 years ago, I mean, I was the only one. There was a couple houses on, behind me, which I have the easement. They have an easement for my property. But you go down and it was all cedar trees. And, across from me was cedar trees. And there was hardly any homes or anything. And then all of a sudden people, started logging off the property, and all of a sudden there's houses everywhere. Now I'm the only one in this area that has almost 2 acres of cedar trees. It's this, I went here to get away from all the city, away from the drive-by shootings. I loved it because, I felt really secure on the property. Now it's like, oh, gee.
It's kind of like I moved away from the city, but the city moved to me.
Yeah, that's what's happened. So we only got like about a minute left. Anything else you want to talk about?
No. I think I love your story. I miss Art Bell. Growing up, like really early in my life, I would go to sleep listening to Art Bell. talking on the radio, and I've listened to you a couple of times. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Did we lose him, JC?
What your I forget her name. I mean, I know Linda's on there. Thomas is on there. What is the name of the person that just came out with her mother? She had
That's Barb.
Barb. Yeah, the original is original. Right?
The original Barb. It's been here for 5.5 years.
Yeah. I really I really want to give my condolences. I mean, not my condolences. My respect to her. My mom is in the same thing. She's in a assisted care with Alzheimer's, and it's really, really hard to lose somebody like that, where you walk into the room with your mom and she doesn't even recognize you. She says, "Oh, who are you?" You know, just it's life is hard. So
it is. Did you ever hear how I explained with my father? He had dementia and Alzheimer's, and he didn't even know who my family was, my kids, or me. And then he returned more in the vegetable state. And then I get a phone call from the doctor saying, "Your dad's coherent." And I said, "Wait a minute, you told me he would never be coherent again." And he says, "He's totally coherent. He's talking, he's, making sense. But I recommend you get in here." And I had to drive from, Tacoma at that time to Shelton, where he was at. And I had a conversation with my dad for like 20 minutes or so. And he was totally coherent. He knew who I was. He asked me how my jobs were.
Was that his end of life?
Well, again, we talked, like I said, for about 20 minutes. And then he said, "Well, my wife is right there, my mom, okay? She's waiting for me." And then Kippy and Ernie, that was her brothers that all passed on. They're all standing there waiting for me. And he goes, "You need to go now." So, okay. And I left. And by the time I got home, I got a phone call and they said he passed 20 minutes after I left.
Yeah, there's so many stories of that.
He got totally coherent. I think that, to patch, because we had problems, me and him, getting along off and on through the years.
Yeah.
And hard feelings off and on. But you lose somebody to dementia and then Alzheimer's on top of it. They're not the loved one. They're physically there, but they're not there. Yeah. They're not there anymore. And to have them come back, it made closure for him, I think, and for me. But it also made me think, is he actually seeing my mom and her brothers there waiting because he was totally coherent? I don't know. It's something to think about. Hey, Rory, feel free to call in on any.
Gary, I've heard so many stories of that at the end of life where that's exactly what happens, where it's kind of like the kiss of goodbye.
Yeah, it is. But at least it gave me some fond memories of my dad. Yeah. I didn't have to remember him, being a vegetable. So that made a big difference. Anyway, you're free to call in on every Friday if you want. Okay, Rory?
Hey, love you, Gary.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Take care in Owala for me, will you?
All right.
Okay. Maybe we'll go down to that store down there by the bridge and have a beer sometime. You take care.
All right.
Okay, bye. Yeah, a lot of things, JC, you think about how life is. And then, it just does a flip, like somebody who has Alzheimer's and dementia and is totally vegetable, and then all of a sudden coming back to a total normal state, at least for a short period of time. It just makes me wonder about things. And they think they might have found a way to reverse Alzheimer's. It's going to be FDA. They're really slow, but they have come out with a protein that they figured it might start reversing that. JC, I can't hear you. You're not.
Hey, we got Linda on the line.
Oh, okay. Who do we have?
Linda.
Well, hi, Linda. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
So, what's up?
The show. Let me turn the volume off on the show because, okay.
What would you like to talk
I
about?
wanted to talk a little bit about past life regression.
Okay.
Because I know a number of people are really interested in it. And about 30 years ago was the first time I got introduced to it. And I was, I had seen a ghost at work, and I was asking around, and this lady finally came out of the woodworks at work and said, "Have you ever met Sylvia Brown?" I go, "No, who's that?" And so we got to talking, and as we ended up going to classes with Sylvia Brown for a couple of years.
Now, let me jump in here, Linda. Sylvia Brown was a witch, correct?
No, she was a psychic medium.
Yes, psychic medium, but she also was a witch. And the reason why I know that, she was on Art Bell's show numerous times. So she did do regressions and being a psychic, but she claimed she was a good witch.
Oh, yeah, I would believe that. Yeah. But she never called herself a witch when I was taking classes with her. So,
okay.
Yeah. So is it time to talk to Gary?
You're talking to Gary.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You're talking to me. Yes, that's me.
It's got a different time of its own. So that's why I turned off the volume.
Do I sound sexy over the phone?
A good witch. So when I got to taking classes with her, one of the very first things that she emphasized in talking about everything is that I will only teach you these things if you're going to use them for good and for healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already there, so I didn't have to worry about that. And we learned about a lot of stuff, and praying, meditating, how things were. And I was just really happy to meet Sylvia, because here was someone who had experienced just about everything that I had experienced and had no one to talk to. So when we got to doing the hypnosis classes, then she introduced us to past life regression. And a lot of people have been telling me that there's different ways of doing past life regressions. And I can imagine within the last 30 years that how we talk to people on the other side has changed. And because I know that when I was with her in class, we learned about the pendulum and how to use it. And I was so curious that I used the pendulum to ask yes, no questions. And I had a birthmark on the back of my leg, and I was told that these are signs of a past life where you haven't. It was very tragic, and you didn't have a chance to finish the past life. It ended too soon. And so when I used the pendulum and I did the yes, no questions, boy, was that slow. But what happened was that a scene started developing in my mind, and I began seeing all the players. I saw myself, I saw my mother, I saw my father. I was an Indian, a male, and my mom had married a chief of a tribe that didn't really accept us. We were not equals in their eyes. And my life ended early because I had to go hunting. When her husband died, the tribe let us stay there, but they kind of ostracized us. And so I would be the one to go get the food and everything. And so I was on a hunting trip, and I ran into a white man, and he let his wagon go downhill and push me into a tree limb. It was a low-lying tree limb. And I struggled to get back home, but I died on the way. And that's when I realized that, sorry, voice going out, that prejudice was the thing that I was supposed to learn about. And I looked at my life at the time, and I'm going like, this present life, and I'm going like, yes, I have been prejudiced against. I know what that's like. And it just made a really indelible impression upon me. And I guess I'm a little sensitive about it because it was so dramatic. And the thing of it is that I talked about it probably 6 years ago. I hadn't talked to anybody about it until 6 years ago. And this lady had a guest on her show who knew about this kind of stuff. And I told it in like, the very short version that you can do. And then I said at the end, after all was said and done, and I had figured everything out and taken it into my life, my birthmark, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it anywhere. And the guy came on and said, well, that's typical when you have a birthmark and it's related to a past life. And you've been able to visit that past life and learn what the lesson was that you were supposed to finish and learn in that lifetime, then the birthmark will disappear. And I tell you, it had. I didn't see hide nor hair of it.
Interesting. Linda, how has it changed your life? Spiritually, emotionally, how has it changed your life?
Well, the thing about resolving lessons from a past life is that it can improve your health. It can help you grow, like you said, spiritually, learning certain lessons in life. We're here on earth. This is a school. And we're here to learn because while we are in body, we can feel emotions. And emotions are where everything is recorded that we do, that we live, that we learn. And so when you die, when the body dies, your soul goes on and you have your memories. And so if you want to remember something like your favorite cake or your favorite meal, you can bring it back to mind because all of that information got stored because of the emotions that we can feel here on earth.
Interesting. Now, real quick, our time has run out. What are you going to do for Christmas this year?
Oh, we'll probably go to our favorite restaurant. We always have a new one, but we like to have barbecue.
Nothing wrong with that. So you don't have a fancy, what we do is we do opposite. We also have like turkey and we have a ham and we have, something else for Christmas. And then we sit there for a week later. We don't have to worry about doing any cooking.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Well, Linda,
okay, it's been really wonderful talking with you. And I saying hi to my friend Kim and all my new friends that I've been making here on your show. I really had a good time.
Well,
thank you very much.
Feel free to call in on another Friday.
Okay.
Okay, you take care and Merry Christmas coming up to you. Yeah, again, if you think about it, sometimes I wonder if I have had a past. I don't know. Again, I watched so many science fiction movies for the last 40 years. I wouldn't know if I actually had a past or not because my brain, JC, is so tied up in all these horror movies and sci-fi movies and monster movies, the Loch Ness monster movies, that, I go to bed at night. When I do go to bed, I have these dreams. And I'll tell you, is that reality? Was that a past life? Or is it because it's all these movies being merged into one?
Yeah. You and all your dreams and from the movies and nightmares is all in one big ether cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they figured they also solved the Loch Ness monster thing. Have you seen that in the news this past week?
No, I seen it, but I haven't been able to read it. I was assuming that we're back with the eels, but maybe we're not. What is it?
They're saying it's a giant eel.
Yeah.
Eel. That's huge.
Yeah, it had. I just don't think there's enough food in there to support a big animal or a bunch of big animals, but maybe an eel.
Yeah, well, they're talking about a 30-some-foot eel.
Oh my goodness, that's an eel.
No, how would you like one of those to come up your toilet seat?
Oh boy, yeah. I don't want something like that looking at any eggs. No.
Eggs. I'm talking testicles. What are you talking? Your eggs? What? You got chickens around there? You're in Ohio?
Don't get me going with that pirate stuff again.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But you know what? I won't. If you want to call in, our call-in number is 716-405-0253. That's 716-405-0253. We'll take one or two more calls. If not, we'll just sign off in a couple minutes. But, if anybody has any recipes for a pie or anything interesting, for Christmas dinners, give us a call. I'm more than happy to talk about that. Or has anybody time traveled? Has anybody had an experience? Because I had a time slip myself with my two sons years ago. And that was unique. And I do think if that was not a figment of my imagination, because they remember it so well, it was the same thing. We were going up to Mount Rainier to take pictures of a falls and by Clearwater or Clear, whatever it was. And, when I was a kid, I remember distinctly my parents and my grandparents, we get inside their 56 Metropolitan, Nash or whatever it was. Boy, that was cramped. And we'd go up there, for a ride. And we'd always stop at this one little cafe off the side of the road. And they would drink coffee and I would get a soda. Well, years went by. I grew up and had kids. I'm out there going to go take pictures and we're driving. And there was a reader board on the side of this road. And it said hamburgers. And soda for blankety blank. And my kid, $1, and that was even cheap, seriously, back in the early 80s and stuff. $1. So we go in there. And first thing I noticed, the car, of course, my car going back down, that would have been antique, but the cars were like in the early 60s type vintage. And and I kind of thought that was strange. Well, maybe the people here classic cars. I don't know. And we go in there, and back even then, my grandmother wore clothes of like in the 50s. I hate to say it, or early 60s, and all the people in there, the glasses and that they wore, the people who wore glasses, the clothing, and all that stuff was probably a good 20 years out of date. And the people, I remember it. It was like my hair was standing up on my arms because they would stare at us. And I was staring at them and trying not to stare. And, we had these huge hamburgers, huge. And, my kids ate, I ate, and then we left. And then I went and got my pictures and the waterfalls. But I wanted to go back the following weekend to get more because it was just a beautiful area. And like naturally, hey, I'll go with you, Dad, if we can stop it. Yeah, sure, we can stop there. And we're driving on the same road. I didn't have dementia at that time. And the landmarks I knew very well. And we're driving, and I can't find this cafe off the right side of the road. And I go up and down, and it's not there. Now, I did notice it looked like a building burnt down, but I didn't pay attention to it at the time. I'm frustrated. So I pull into the store in Clearwater, and I go in there and I go, last week, me and my sons were right there with me when we were talking to the lady. We stopped at this cafe. It couldn't have been more than about 2 miles down the road. And the lady goes, there's no cafe down the road. If you want anything, you have to, we got, you can buy sandwiches out of the refrigerator and all that stuff. But there's no cafe down the road. And she goes, that burnt down years ago. And that has stuck in my head so strongly. In fact, after last time I talked about my show, I talked to my one son that was with me on that, and he remembers it so vivid. If that place burnt down years ago, then where did we eat the hamburgers and have the soda? Seriously. And what happens if we would have hung in there, JC, just a few minutes longer? Could we have been stuck in that time zone and continued on forever like that?
Yeah, that's the thing. You probably would have eventually been arrested for counterfeit money because the money you had in your pocket was probably, in the future. That's a bizarre.
I'm surprised that didn't happen, because if they would have looked the date on the currency. But at that time, the currency really didn't change much from the early 60s to the 80s.
Right.
It didn't make that, big change here to 1990 or something, or 1999 when they went into the new type of currency. But I tell you, it was really eerie.
Yeah, that would be eerie. It would be. You mentioned that Nash. That give me a flashback to something that in the 70s. My uncle, God rest his soul, he was only 10 years older than me, and then we had a cousin. I had a cousin who was like between us. So anyway, in the summertime, we'd all get together and visit. We had brought this old 60s Falcon, Gary, and we would go on this country road up this pretty good sized mountain out near Gilmore, Ohio. And the Falcon was so slow, we would have to get out and jog beside him. And he had it floored going up a hill. We would talk to him and jog. We had to get out and jog beside the car to make the hill. It was just crazy, the stuff we went through.
I had a Falcon, and they weren't that gutless unless they had a lot of miles on it and the engine was shot.
It did. It was a 6-cylinder that had way too many miles on it.
You're talking about the taillights were round too in the back.
It was the short ones, the real short.
the square boxes.
Yeah.
But could you imagine, though? You put it this way: my grandmother was a little chubby. My mom and me in the back seat of if you know what a Metropolitan Nash is.
Oh yeah,
they're smaller than a VW inside.
Yeah. Oh boy, what a ride that must have been. I tell you, we learned after a couple trips. He'd say, "You want to go for a ride?" We're like, "We're not going in that old Falcon." We had to jog half the way.
Well, when one of my Harley Davidsons broke down years ago, and we had a skate park in Port Orchard at that time, indoor skate park, and I didn't drive a car. I didn't like driving a car. I went for years without getting into a car as a driver. I would put on 20-some thousand miles a year on my motorcycle at least.
Oh my!
I mean that if I went anywhere, rain, snow, sun, I used my motorcycle. It broke down. Okay, and it had to go into a Harley for it was like a week, and I figured, okay, well, I'm not going to buy another motorcycle because I just bought one for my son. I have this one, which was around $30,000. I decided, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy one of these Chinese, gas scooters. And I got a 49cc scooter. And you know what? It would hit 50 miles an hour on a nice day with no breeze going straight. Yeah. But to get where I had to go up this one hill. Actually, I had to go down a hill and then up a hill. And so I would have to go down a hill on this little, scooter, right? I'm 5'11". At that time, I weighed 220 pounds. And going down the hill, the only way I could get up the hill is, and I found this out the first time because I went up it and I only went a fourth the way up it, and I had to walk it up, which was killer. So I found if I would go down this hill and take it to 80, 90 miles an hour, I could get up to the top of the hill.
80, 90 miles.
But you're talking, have you ever seen these little gas 49cc?
I know about what you're talking about. Yeah.
If you have one of those, you don't even need a motorcycle license or endorsement.
Yeah, that's the thing. Right.
Yeah. Because, come on, they're a little teeny motor.
Yeah, you're right. They're so tiny. And, talking about little cars too, in the late 90s, I bought my deceased wife a car, and it had a hole and where underneath your feet where you could see the road.
I'm sorry, I had one like that.
As you're driving. Now, here's the funny part. I paid $50 for this car in 1996. And it got 40 miles a gallon. But here's the good part. When I get home, I told my wife, I said, "Hey, I bought you a Vet. It's right outside." She goes, "What? You bought a Vet?" I said, "Yeah." She looked down. She goes, "What? that's not a Corvette. I didn't say it was a Corvette. It was a Chevette, and she, that's what it was. It was a Chevette, but it had the hole in the floor, Gary, but it got 40 miles a gallon. It wasn't very heavy car, but
I had a Malibu. You remember 67 Malibu?
60. Oh yeah, 67. Yeah,
it could have been a 64. It was right that vintage. I got really ripped off. I bought it from a guy. He had a quarter panel. I didn't know it had a beautiful paint job because they repainted it. And one day I was driving and I parked the car right and slammed the door. And on the quarter panel, about 5 inches deep of Bondo by about 3 feet long fell off.
Oh my God.
But they converted it from an automatic to a stick shift. So they cut a hole out too big. They cut a hole too big where the shifter was. They put her shifter in it, right? Yeah. And one day, me and a bunch of guys, we had a hole. This is back in my young days, okay? We had some bottles of beer and cans of beer, and all of a sudden there's this light behind me, right? So I pull over, and I tell everybody, hand me your bottles, hand me your cans. And we were dropping them right down, by the shifter right down on the ground. And the cop looked around, he goes, have you guys been drinking? No. And he's looking around in there and he doesn't see any alcohol. Okay. Because we put all the probably a lot of them right down there. And when we drove off, right? We drove off fast. Could you imagine the cop? And he never came after us. They had to be at least more than a 12-pack of beer cans and pop. Bottles of beer. And some of them even still had alcohol in it right there where we were parked.
Yeah, you left a big pile of trash and beer bottles and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. So it was like, hey,
Yeah, hey, listen, them cars with holes in the floorboards, they're convenient for some things, but other things like in the wintertime, it was a bear.
Oh, yeah, or you accidentally drop something down it when you're driving.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you another thing. Like, when you get like a foot of snow and you're driving, the snow comes up in it like
yeah, it does. And then, I'll be honest with you, then it starts rusting out, and then it gets bigger.
Yeah.
Now, come on. Has anybody got a recipe? Do I have to sit here and beg you guys? Now, we can take one or two more calls, okay, to make this work. If you want to hear me keep talking on Fridays after our guest, you need a call. And the number is 1-716-405-0253. Tell me what it's like out there when you're going shopping. Have you bought a new car? Are you planning to buy a new car if we can never figure out how to afford them anymore? And, also, JC, they're saying it's almost impossible now that the interest rate is going up on buying homes, the mortgage rates, that young people are not going to be able to buy. It's been hard as it is, but it's going to be even harder to buy a house.
Yeah, I don't see it getting any easier anytime soon, that's for sure. But yeah, that's depressing for the young folks.
No, it is. Not even for that. I mean, for anybody.
Oh,
and then, one of my friends just called me up and, hey, we just sold our house and we're going to buy a new house. And I go, oh, really? Yeah. We just sold our house and got almost $1 million for it. I said, oh, okay, where are you moving? Oh, such and such. What are you buying? And how much is it costing you? Oh, about $1 million. But he said, but when we bought this other house back then, it was only like 400 and some thousand.
Wow.
And I said, okay, but you paid 400,000, you got $1 million for it, but now you're buying another house that's not much bigger than what you have. So what have you accomplished?
Yeah, it's like you really didn't accomplish nothing. You should have just kept the one you had.
That's what I would think. The point is, that's how much is inflation. People don't realize it. I grew up when I could buy a 3-cent candy bar and 11 cents for a bottle of pop. I could get a hamburger for a dime, a milkshake for 19 cents. And, and now go buy a hamburger. I went to McDonald's today. I got a Big Mac, I got a fry, and I got a soda. $16 and something.
Oh, my goodness. Probably the best thing, if you sold a house for $1 million and you made like 600 grand off of it, best thing to do is just buy a really nice RV and just travel the country.
Do you know how much an RV costs now?
Yeah, not $1 million.
Well, you put it this way. 200, if you go buy a new one, and if you want to buy a diesel, because if you don't buy anything that's not diesel, you're only going to get about 60,000 miles on the motor, and the motor is going to be shot, and along with the transmission, because they're carrying a lot of weight. So you go out and get a diesel one, right? And now a new one's going to start out around 190 some thousand to $230,000 range. Okay, and the maintenance on it is very expensive. Try buying a tire for one of those. Try it, anything. And if you, God, run out of diesel somewhere, then you have to have a mechanic come out, because you just can't put diesel back in it and start it. You have to go through and take the air out the line and do all this stuff, and it's expensive. But then they depreciate really fast. So, I mean, that's what you have to think. We got another caller back on. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, this is Linda again.
We got to quit meeting this way. My wife, Linda, will get jealous.
Uh-oh. This is Linda Judd.
Well, Linda.
And, say they?
Go ahead. We're live. Everybody can hear us.
Well, I wanted to tell you that I was born in Texas, very flat in Texas, in Houston. And so me and my mom, after a fashion, we came out to California, and we lived in San Francisco. And we lived out by the beach, Highway 1 and Playland at the beach. And so that was flat too. And I thought, wow, okay, it's flat. But when we went out to the beach and the water was so cold. And it's not like Galveston where the water is really warm. But the thing that you guys reminded me of is that when I started going to school, I started the 4th grade out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We lived in San Francisco. And our apartment was by the Golden Gate Park, and that's flat too, that area. But just a few short blocks away, everything goes uphill. And so I'm walking.
Oh, wait a minute, Linda. It goes uphill, but if you live uphill, it goes downhill.
Well, it does that too. And what I did is that I kept feeling like I was going to fall when I walked forward, because my legs just didn't go that way. They didn't bend. The feet didn't bend. I mean, my feet were used to flat land. And so when I went uphill, I was so afraid that I was going to fall that all the way to school, I walked uphill backwards.
I got to ask you a question. When I was young, okay, and stupid. I thought if I walked backwards, I could go back in time.
Well, that's a good one. Yeah. I think that, getting into the, I haven't experimented with this yet, but I might. So people are talking about being 3rd dimensional, 4th dimensional, 5th dimensional. And then when you're in 5th dimensional, there is no past, no future. There's just now. And it's like, oh, that's kind of going to be hard to get used to, But I thought that, if that's the case, then I could probably travel in time by maybe doing, because I can astral project in dreams. And I figure if I was going to time travel, that's how I'd do it. Yeah.
I don't want to astral. I'm
doing it.
I would. Astro was one thing, but, like I mentioned, like a time slip. Did I go back in time temporarily? I mean, that is something that I can't, it wasn't an astral thing. We were driving and my sons were with me. We experienced that.
It's such the thing. Friends of mine have told me about the same situation that you guys were in, and they lost like 3 hours. And they just can't figure out how they lost 3 hours, because they drove and they found a dead end in the hills, And when they looked at their clock, it was like, wait a minute, 3 hours have gone by. Where did we go? This is where we ended up, at this dead end. And we haven't been anywhere. We haven't gone forward. Nobody came to visit us, And it's like, I think that there is a thing that you might want to, I guess, let me tell you about, is that we have frequencies in the world, and all the musical notes are a certain frequency. Humans are a certain frequency. Our soul is a certain frequency, and there's low emotions and high emotions, and high emotions are kin to high frequencies, and low emotions are kin to low frequencies. And Earth is a low frequency planet. And so in order to grow spiritually, to ascend, so to speak, in our lessons on life and things like that, we're aiming to be of a higher frequency. And I learned recently, and I actually do believe this, is that if there is someone attacking you and you suspect that they are of the low variety, they're going to be of a low frequency. And if you raise yourself to a higher frequency by things like singing, praying, meditating, just anything that you can instantly do to raise your frequency, you will disappear from their sight, and you won't be able to see them either. And so now you're protected because nobody can find each other.
So
I have a feeling that something along those lines happened when you were in that experience of that restaurant. And I can't, at this moment, I haven't thought about it long enough to understand what that is, how the frequency level, how that would have been with you and your family visiting the restaurant from the past. But it's very interesting, and I'll probably think about it in the next time.
I have thought about it.
Fix it out.
Linda, I thought about it so many times, and it's eerie, And when you tell people that, they look at you, okay, did you escape out of the mental hospital? But, again, my two sons were with me. My one late son, Scotty, was with me, and my other son was with me. And, we talked about that so many times about whatever happened. I mean, it's an eerie feeling to figure maybe you went back in time.
The answer will come. Someday the answer will come, and you'll be like, wow, that's a great mystery been solved. But I would say enjoy the uniqueness of that experience, and because I find it to be a fascinating story.
Think about how many people go missing. I'm not talking in the forests like the 411 cases, but people go vanishing off this planet with no trace. Yes, there's serial killers.
Possible.
Yeah, maybe
the vortexes that people talk about?
Yeah.
You can vanish in a vortex. I don't know how you get back.
Well, some of them maybe don't come back. That's the whole problem.
At the college I went to, they had the University of Hayward. I wrote about it in tonight's chat. The university at Hayward, the California State University at Hayward, was built on the fault line. And I happened to find the vortex spot in the admin building, and it just scared me so much. And I tried to stay on that spot, but it made me feel weird. I started to black out, and I had to get out of that circle of space that this vortex was.
Yeah.
And I knew about that. And for years I would write to them. And finally, 30 years later, they actually tore down that building, and they made a new admin building some distance away, still on the campus.
Well, Linda, I hate to cut it short, but our time is up here.
Yeah.
Give a call next Friday, will you?
All righty.
Okay.
I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Okay. Time slips and stuff like that. Whatever. Did I go in a portal back in time and go out of it again? Was that vortex still open when I left? That is the scary part. And in my mind, Like I talked to my son Ricky about this back a couple of weeks ago when we talked about this on the air. Well, what would happen if we would have stayed there for a second hamburger or, had pie or ice cream, which they wanted, and I didn't have enough money at that time, and so we didn't. What would have happened if we would have stayed there just a few more minutes? You might not be hearing from me now, but the thing is, if I'm going to go back in time, I want to regress in my age too, at least, a certain amount. Because if you go back in time and you're, of course, it has this advantage, JC. If you go back in time and you know what the stock market's going to do, what this is going to do, people, I would buy as much property as I could, around, the towns and cities where, like Walmart's going to go and office buildings going to go. You'd be one of the richest people in the planet. So that's really interesting. Think about that. I think we got Space Case back on. Okay, Space Case, we're here.
So I've got a time slip story for you.
I want to hear.
One I personally experienced. It was my flashlight that did it. My brother was going. I used to live in Fresno. My brother was going to San Francisco, and I don't know if you've ever been stuck by the side of the road, like a while ago when there weren't enough cars. You can never change a flat tire if you got no light. So he asked me, do you have a flashlight? So I'm like, yeah, no problem. I went out, walked across the street from where I lived, put the flashlight in the glove box of the car, closed it, and then he went to go visit his friends in San Francisco. When he got back, mostly because I guess I was like 17 years old at the time, I'm like, instantly walked out, where's the flashlight, opened the glove box, wasn't there. I figured somebody had stolen it. And he's like, gosh, I have no clue. I left the car locked. No problem at all. Anyway, 6 months later, I opened the glove box of that car. Flashlight's right there. No place for it to hide. I've got no explanation for that one. Anyway, I have talked to so many people that have had time slip stories. People that were out in the middle of the desert and the road texture changed. All the AM radio stations disappeared. So many things. One of the best ones was from my friend Zach that said he drove into a whole town in Ohio where these people all had candlelight by their doors. And you got this horrible feeling that you could get out of there really soon. He'd never come back. He said he drove through that town so fast back the other direction, and the road returned to normal, everything. Anyway, I've talked to so many people who have time slip stories. You are not alone.
Well, you think about it too. Some people say, oh, it's poltergeist or ghost. But, I've talked to so many people that had experiences, they believe in ghosts, and they say things vanish. They put something on a table and they go back and get it. It's not there. I've had that, in my studio. I work with electronic equipment. I'm not that to the point where I have dementia. I know where I put my tools, and I'll go back to get that maybe solder iron or something, or that special cable that I just got in, and I put it there. It's gone. I can't find it anywhere. Days go by. I end up having to but go online to Amazon, order it again. Okay. And then I walk back in the studio and it's right there. And I mean, literally, I've had everything pulled off of that table. I knew it was not there, and nobody in this family would do that. And, and I'm sure other people have things like that happen to them.
Lots of people have that happen. And my conclusion is reality is a lot less solid than most people think.
But do we actually have reality? Could we be nothing more than a computer program running somewhere?
I think it's something slightly different. Look at what the shamans teach us. They say every world is a dream world. Now, I'm one of those weird people. I go run physics experiments in dream worlds, which is really hard to go do that. But I've noticed that the speed of gravity is the same in a bunch of different dream realms. The physics I've uncovered, the toroidal thing that Bob Greenier has shared with all of us, I think that these field formats, they're all shared. All these dream worlds, all these places, they're just different frequencies. And if something ends up in a different frequency, well, it's somewhere else. I think it's stacked realities running different frequencies. I am completely convinced of that.
How about parallel universes? Like Michio Kaku was on our show, and he was talking about we're so close to cracking the fourth dimension. It's this matter of time, not a long time, he said. And then, vortexes, parallel universes, and all that stuff could be all merging. And maybe that's what we're doing. We're going in and out of maybe, I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
So, have you ever seen the magnetic vortex idea? This crazy Russian scientist that, by the way, ended up, I think, killed over his invention. It was abbreviated MAGVID, and it's a magnetic vortex thing. I've been fascinated with it. But the thing that gets me the most about this is the crazy claims he has of what it's going to do, and looking at the magnetic pole shift of the Earth, the whole Earth is going to be doing this, and is to a slight degree now, in the very near future. I think this electron surplus we've had keeping our reality solid is about to disappear. And this is probably why magic is in the mythology, because I think there are points in Earth's history where this place sort of melts into a dream world and you can do whatever you want.
That is a possibility. But have you ever thought what could happen when the Earth does the flip? Depending on what scientists you have, some scientists say, oh, we won't notice it because we go back to prehistoric trees and we can look at their growth patterns when when a Earth flipped, magnetic field flipped. But again, it could be end of everything we know. I know that when it flips, we're not going to have no grid left.
Oh, are you as technically capable as Art Bell was?
I don't know. I had my first I got my amateur license at 12. My dad was an electronic engineer that was developing for Boeing's when they were going to make the super transport aircraft. He was developing electronics for it before they canned the whole project. I was one of the first people to make an IBM XT clone that was fully compatible. I worked with Dr. Wayne on that. I mean, I have a lot of electronic background.
Yeah, I'm thinking yes then. It's the power grid. Anyone that knows enough about electricity and how it works and the problems the power companies have, get ready for the electricity to disappear. The electrical grid, we're on the second one. The first one was wiped out in the 1920s with a solar storm. What makes us think it's not going to happen again?
We haven't done anything to shore it up. That's the whole problem. And, people, this like doing the show. Our whole life is tied into the internet. And if we lose the internet, you're not going to get money from the bank. You're not even going to be able to go into the bank and get money. You're not going to be able to go online and listen to my show. And life as we know it has all been dependent on artificial intelligence and computers and the internet. And with the grid gone and that gone, we're gone.
Well, I have an off-grid radio set up on the 40-meter band, so say hi anytime. But how many people will do that? Like, I keep telling all my physics friends, set up PSK 31 on 40 meters. Let's go. And they look at it and they're like, this is a lot of work. Like, the internet's easier.
I want to jump in, though. Space case, okay, you're all set up, maybe a little bit of prepping, but do you have a garbage can, metal garbage can, and put some cardboard on the bottom and around it? And then if we hear of a major flare coming, at least you can create your own Faraday cage by taking that garbage can and putting your electronics in it.
I have an enormous amount of storage space with full Faraday cage shielding with all the test equipment, because coming up with most of the electronics, not that hard. Getting your test equipment through it, getting your oscilloscope, the rest of that, you need those things, or there's no way you're going to ever figure this stuff out again. I am completely ready for that. I felt something coming in the future since, the mid-1990s, and I've been panicked about it. And I kind of wonder, is this like a 2-week event and I'm super over-prepared?
I don't know. It's scary, and I think it's being played. What is going on with the sun right now? JC, jump in here. Who was it we had on our show? I can't think of his name. Dale. Stan Dale. He was talking about, he designs Faraday cages, and he slipped up on the show. Didn't he talk about that? The government knows that by a certain year that the sun is going to do something weird.
Yeah, 2025 or within the next 10 years anyway. Stan Dale, he was talking about that on our show. Yes.
Yeah, he said we're going to lose the whole grid.
I know his research well, especially like his wedding cake anti-gravity thing and that. One of my friends says they've built it and that it works, and I keep trying to get more details on it. And that guy is pretty brilliant, but his like electrical engineering understanding isn't quite there enough to share the technical details to reproduce anything he talks about. Drives me about crazy.
It does. But yeah. I'm prepared though. I'm telling you, I got a garbage can. But what good is it going to do to have a radio in it unless somebody else does it? Then you can talk back and forth. But if you don't, then you're not going to listen to your favorite radio show. You're not going to get on your internet. You're not going to do anything. You're not even going to have food in your refrigerator after about 2 days, and then you're going to have people knocking on your door.
Well, I mean, one of the things I've heard, that was your radio show when you said like a generator will attract everyone around.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I jokingly said, well, this is called bait because, people in that sort of scenario. Suppose one of my friends, they were like, a generator is bait. Like if somebody wants to come in, I've got hungry children to feed. I start the generator, I sit at a distance, and then that's my food. But oh my gosh, I don't know what the world's going to do in that sort of scenario. It's why solar is quiet. And if you do the right filtering on it, you can make EMP filters for solar things, put inductors and capacitors. Mm-hmm. It's not horribly difficult. There are ways to really set yourself up well, but still electricity is transient. Without all the world grid, the people that make the chips in other countries, to stop caring about electricity, it's not going to last forever. I met someone fantastic. He was 20 years old before he ever saw electricity. Can you imagine like living without it at all? Most of us can't, but I think we need to get back there.
Well, we're all dependent on it. Again, like if the grid goes out, I mean, let's face it, you're not going to flush your toilet because you're not going to get water come into your house. You're not going to turn the light on. You're not going to have heat. How about all the people are dependent, on heat in the winter if it happened at the wrong time? How many people will perish there? How many people are going to perish in the nursing homes and hospitals? And how long will it take before the society as we know it will collapse? The CIA had a study on it, and they said that society would collapse within a year.
I think it would be done with the collapse within a year. I think we can look to other countries like Venezuela and places that have had, was it Argentina, that had these big financial collapses. And I've read what people have said about it. They said anyone that does not have the drive to live, within 2 weeks, they're gone. If you're not going to fight for it, you're not going to be there anymore. And it's a bit worrisome. I think... Anyway, I worry about that stuff, but like I can't personally solve it. All I could do is tell people, go get ready for stuff. The warning signs are already written on the walls.
It is, and people need to prepare for it and have enough water. A person's going to need at least a gallon of water per person a day. And then if you think also, if you're in your little apartment or a house when this goes on, think about it. Unless you want to go out in the bushes every time, you got to have water to flush your toilet. Otherwise, no one's going to want to live in your house after 3 days. It's a lot of things people don't do. They don't prepare. Just think about when COVID hit, the stores, you couldn't even get toilet paper. People were fighting. And then at one point, people were even buying every bit of food they could get. So you go in a grocery store and they were either limiting, at least in our area, about how much food you can get. You couldn't even get beans after a couple of days. canned beans. I mean, they were all sold out.
I completely agree on the one thing I tell people: go tape off your water faucets, go take the handle on your toilet off, go outside and click off your circuit breaker and try to live just a weekend. Just try it as an exercise. Most people get through 45 minutes before they realize how they aren't ready. It's a super easy exercise. Just go try it.
You know, when I was a kid, honestly, Space Case, I had a friend that owned a little grocery store, and I used to hang out there as a kid. There was a vet from World War I who had a house up in in Seattle, but it was an area like back then they still had little farms in areas of Seattle. It wasn't all built up at that point. And he had an old house. He had no water going to it. He had no sewer going to it. He had no electricity. And he survived because he didn't know. He didn't want it. He didn't want to come into our century. And he lived to a nice age. But what would happen, though, if all this goes out, you got people that, the bad people are going to be hitting the streets like Mad Max. You're going to have all these scenarios that, hey, well, I don't have any food. I'm going to go get it. I don't care what I have to do. I want it because I'm hungry.
You remind me of someone I met in a bar.
I do. I don't drink.
Oh,
I'm joking.
That's good. This guy, he ran Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite, and he was gathering people to go raid others after this sort of thing happened. This is his plan. I told him, I'm like, this is not who I am. Never going to do that. And we were on complete opposite side. It was the craziest thing to meet someone that was planning to do that. I don't even know what to make of it other than don't go to Tuolumne Meadows.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm not so much worried about the grid right now as I'm worried about Yellowstone going, because I've been keeping up with that. And they said that thing could go at any moment now. And if it goes, again, it's going to take, people don't realize it. They think, it's only going to take out Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming and part of Washington. Actually, it'll take out half the country.
The blast radius is enormous, but the cloud, and I don't know how many people realize.
And the gas.
Stuff on the internet, the year without a summer. How many of those are you going to find of these massive volcanoes that go off? They wipe out the sun. There's no crops for a year and a half. This is a huge deal. I love gardening. I love plant breeding. This is one of my huge hobbies. But you better have a year and a half, 2, 3 years. If you're not a good gardener, you need to learn. It takes time. You need a lot of food stored. It's why in 1940, 43 or something, the United States had 1 3/4 years worth of grain stored up. And then the last of the people at that point that remembered the last year without a summer had died off, and those supplies have dropped. Now we're less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's such a big deal.
It is. And it's scary. So I don't want to wreck everybody's holidays. But I mean, really be prepared. Have enough food to last for at least 2 weeks. Have enough water to last for 2 weeks. It's not that expensive for water. Buy it, stock up. We never know what the future is. But, with the sun acting like it is, and, again, if Yellowstone decide to do its thing, or we have a major earthquake and it takes out an area, be prepared, because any of this stuff could happen, or we could end up, God forbid, with a war with Russia. I mean, a lot of different things could go on. So be prepared. And you know what? People don't even know a lot of people, I should say, don't even know, younger people, how to grow vegetables or grow anything. That's the scary part, Space Case. I got to let you go. I want to thank you so much for calling in. And if anybody wants to call in next week, I also want to talk about how they have created a miniature black hole. And that is scary, because what could that maybe create? Could we science fiction movies, they talked about creating a black hole and then the Earth slowly gets pulled into it. Could something like that happen someday? I don't know. JC, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I guess only time will tell, Gary. But yeah, these are intriguing questions. And who's to say they have created one already?
They did. Aren't you reading the news? They just created.
I know people that have done it. It doesn't actually lead anywhere bad. They evaporate. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, evaporate. But JC, they just created a black hole last week. Is in the news. A miniature.
I know. You cut me off. I was going to say, who knows? They haven't created one, but don't tell us. Maybe they did something, and you know how they keep things from us. That's what I was trying to say. Get to us. They keep things. Who knows? If it did something, if it took up a part of a block or somebody disappeared from it, we wouldn't know about it. They'd keep it from us,
Oh, yeah. But, can you imagine? I tell you how you're going to know about it is you're going to be standing there in your kitchen, right, making dinner. And all of a sudden, your arms start getting longer. And your legs are getting wobbly because they're being, stretched out. And you're looking down at your feet, and they're getting, longer. And then you're moving. And you don't feel anything around you as you're getting bigger and longer and stretching out. And then you're no more.
Yeah, like Stretch Armstrong, only you disappear.
Well, ever since Michio Kaku talked about what it would be like falling in a black hole, that is not the way to die. I don't want to see. Okay, well, I won't be fat anymore. I just now got stretched out. Yeah,
well, if you fall into one of them black holes,
die when you. I'm glad you can't see him on camera back here. I can see him. Okay. If you fall in a black hole, right, you better have Vaseline.
Oh, my goodness, Gary.
Anyway, I'm not prejudiced. It can be whatever.
I'll never see you again.
But could you imagine, you see the whole universe being, as you're just, well, yeah. That'd be a good way to die, though, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know. We haven't heard back from anybody yet that said it was good or bad.
That's why I wouldn't want to work for a company, that's, services storm drains. You open up the cover, go in the hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then go, how do you know it could be a black hole in there? Or a black mamba, one of the two.
Yeah. Or you might find some of that pirate booty.
Well, I'm glad you said pirate this time.
Yeah, pirate. Well, there's more to it.
Well, nobody has, I know where chat is starting to die off, so people must be getting tired, but I'd like one more call. I would like a recipe.
You just said no more calls.
No, I didn't say that. I said I'd take one more call. I've been posting it.
Okay, you did say one more.
Yeah, I said one more. I still want a recipe if I can give it to my wife. She actually made pumpkin pies this year, and she put the sugar in it. I was so excited. They tasted really good. If you make a pumpkin pie and you don't put any sugar in it, I'll tell you what, the pumpkin tastes horrible.
It'd probably be better.
Yeah. No, you can't have microwave. You can't have microwave TV dinners if we lose our grid. It will not work. What are you going to do? Start a fire and put your plastic container of your food in over at the fire?
Yeah, or that, or put something like one of the metal key. That must be Tom.
Hold on. We'll find out who it is. Let's think about it. If we lost our grid system, how many people would be walking the streets that don't smell good? No showers, no washing machine, no dryers. Gee, life as we know it. No sci-fi on TV because there's no TV, no internet. Oh, gee. Hey, that's one thing. The people that have all this money in the bank, they'll be equal to you. And how would they ever survive? I want to bet you some of these billionaires and multi-millionaires wouldn't even know how to grow a pea plant or anything. I tell you, that's what's really scary. Do we have a caller on the line?
We do. Tom is on with a recipe.
You got a recipe, Tom? What is it? Hot chocolate or cocoa?
Absolutely. It's roast duck.
Okay. Do you have to kill the duck first?
Yeah, absolutely. And pull all the feathers.
Okay. And you do it humanely, right?
More or less, yeah.
I would just run over it, but well, go ahead.
Okay. For something different, I am going to. Chef Tomas is going to do duck, roast duck for his girlfriend for Christmas. So I went to my specialty meat market in Snohomish, and I bought two. They're between 5 and 6 pound ducks, and they're already dressed and ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take bacon, lean bacon that I have. It's European bacon. Instead of basting these ducks, I'm going to cover the ducks with this bacon, and I'm also going to stuff the duck with bacon and cook it at 325 for about 15 minutes a pound. And it should come out yummy, I hope.
Well, does anybody have a heart problem? All that bacon in it.
All that grease goes down to the bottom of the pan, so.
Yeah, sure it does, and the same with your arteries, too, to think about that.
Well, it makes the skin nice and crispy and brown, and you don't have to baste it, and it actually turns out pretty well. I've done it with turkeys, and turns out very well.
Yeah. We won a turkey one time when we first got married at a grocery store. And I was so ecstatic. I asked, is it fresh turkey? Yeah, it's fresh turkey. So they gave us a day to come and pick it up. And it wasn't frozen. But it was a live turkey. And I ended up having to find a farm, to give it to them. And they assured me they weren't going to chop its head off. What am I going to do with a turkey? You think I'm going to sit there and kill a poor turkey? I couldn't live with myself. And then it wrecked that Thanksgiving because I couldn't even eat turkey. That we had to go get ham because I couldn't even eat the thought of even eating turkey after having that turkey, because you know what? They're kind of intelligent. Oh, more than my first wife was.
If somebody did that to me, I'd probably give it to a petting zoo. Yeah, I wouldn't kill it either.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tom. We're going to sign off. I want to wish everybody a great week. And next week, we're going to take calls. And you have a good one, Tom.
All right. You take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, who's some of the guests we have, JC, next week?
Well, some of the guests we have for next week, we got some good ones. We have Paul Wallace coming on actually next Wednesday, Gary, and he's going to be talking about our gods and aliens. Were they misunderstood in the ancient times? Mistaken for gods.
And who else we have?
Guess what? Next Thursday we have Allison Arngrim coming on. She played what on what show, Gary?
Well, Little House in the Prairie. For any younger people, you probably don't know, but that was like the biggest show in that time frame. I mean, you couldn't wait to see what would happen that week.
Yeah, she played Nellie,
the brat.
Yes, the brat. And then Friday, Gary, we have Fred Rule coming on. Now, him and his uncle and his cousin, they were almost killed by about 3 or 4 Bigfoot. They survived it, and he's here to tell us that they are not our wood friends by no means.
Well, that proves the point. A lot of people out there, they give off orbs, they're friendly. They would never hurt mankind. And again, I don't buy that. I mean, they're not human. They didn't grow up watching Father Knows Best, okay? And, my 3 sons, they grew up in the woods, living the way that, non-humans live. Well, I want to thank everybody who's called in tonight. I want to thank our moderator, Kim. And everybody else out there, I want to thank Barb. She, again, send some love to her, please, because she's going through a lot. Her mother is going to pass, and very shortly, she had to put her mother into hospice, and I am sending my love, and I wish you would all send love. Well, till we come back on Wednesday, everybody have a good one. Catch the Hitman Show on Monday and Tuesday. Who's the guest for the Hitman?
Hey, Monday I have Jeff Belanger coming on. He is very well known in the paranormal field, writing about mysteries and lores. And then Tuesday I have Janice Oberding coming on. She is very well known too.
Oberding, I guess she would be known with the name Oberding.
Yeah,
it's better than Oberdang.
Yeah, this is true.
Oberding you too. Okay, everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side of the campground. Watch out, because the worst nightmare could happen.